Hey guys, what's up? Hope everyone's having a great day. Okay, so as you can see, we're doing the transcript of Whitney Heard's or Whitney Henriquez deposition, and it's going to be a long one. So let's snuggle in, let's get our snacks, let's get our drinks, take breaks, do what you need to do. Let's get right into it. Okay, so we have Ben and Camille, Elaine, Johnny and Amber are both there. I don't blame Johnny. I don't blame Johnny one bit. They both have all different motives for being there. Johnny can't believe what the hell his ex-sister-in-law is saying, and Amber is making sure that her sister is saying exactly what she needs to. In my humble opinion, it's all my opinion. Okay, so we go through those. She's sworn in. Okay, Ben. Good morning, Miss Henriquez. My name is Ben Chu, and I represent your former brother-in-law, Johnny Depp, straight out of the gate with the fucking shade. Can you please tell us in what city and state you currently reside? We don't need the exact address, just the city and state, please. Whitney, Los Angeles, California. Elaine, Ben, can I just... Question, Ben, and what kind of... Elaine, before you go much further, Miss Henriquez is 9.5 months pregnant and imminent in that situation, so she may need to take breaks a little more abruptly and everything. I just want to put that on the record and let you be aware of that. Go ahead, Ben. Ben, thank you, Elaine. And I was going to mention that, even irrespective of your condition, it is always your right as a witness to take a break whenever you want to do that. It's not our business why you're doing that. All we ask is that you please try not to take a break in the middle of the question. In other words, if I ask you a question, if you can't answer it and then say, I would like to take a break, please, or not even please, and then we'll just take a break. Whitney, understood. Ben, but I appreciate that. Ben, all right, Whitney, thank you. Ben, you're welcome. And what type of home do you live in, Miss Henriquez? Is it a house or is it an apartment? Whitney, a house. Ben, do you own your house? Whitney, no, sir. Ben, do you rent it? Whitney, yes, sir. Ben, are you living in the house with anybody else? Whitney, yes, my husband and my 3-year-old. Ben, what's your husband's name? Whitney, his name is Gavin. Elaine, I'm just ask that the deposition be marked confidential. Can we go back and de-designate later? We can go back and de-designate later, but for comfort or purpose of privacy for now, so we'll just label it confidential. Thank you. Ben, understood, and I appreciate that, Elaine. Ben, Miss Henriquez, have you ever been deposed before? Whitney, no, sir. Ben, but you understand that you're testifying under oath today, correct? Whitney, yes, sir. Ben, are you currently taking any medications that might affect your ability to testify accurately today? Whitney, no, sir. Ben, do you have any medical condition that might affect your testimony today? Whitney, no, sir, other than my obvious pregnancy. Ben, understood. Because it's important that our very talented court reporter take down everything as said. If you could please try and answer with words rather than shaking your head or saying uh-huh or uh-huh. It's also very important that you and I not speak over each other because the court reporter can only transcribe one voice at a time. Also, your attorney, Ms. Bredehoff, doubtless will be making objections to some of my questions. I will try not to talk over her, and she will try to let me finish my question, and then I'll let her finish her objection. Despite her objecting, you have to answer the question unless she specifically instructs you not to answer. So you'll hear a lot of objections, but you're supposed to answer the question anyway, unless Ms. Bredehoff explicitly tells you not to answer. If I ask you a question that doesn't make sense, please let me know. Otherwise, I'll assume you understand the question. And then Johnny entered the building via virtual deposition room. Question, and finally, going back to your question, first, your counsel's first point, take a break whenever you want and we'll wait for you. Just try to do it after you've answered a question. Elaine, Mr. Chu, can I just jump in? Someone else has joined us here. I think we need to put it on the record. I think it's your client, perhaps. Ben, oh, is that Mr. Depp on the line? Camille, yes, I believe Mr. Depp has joined. Ben, okay. Ben Chu asked a question. Miss Henriquez, other than your attorneys, did you speak to anyone else about your deposition here today? Whitney, no. Ben, did you speak to your husband about it? Whitney, he only knows what I'm doing. He only knows I'm doing it. That sounds like a load of hogwash. Question, you didn't talk with him about any of the substance, what you might be asked, what you would answer, is that correct? Whitney, I did not speak to him regarding specifics. Interesting. Question, did you speak with your sister, Amber Heard, about the fact of your deposition here today? Whitney, she knows I'm being deposed, but she also doesn't know specifics. I call bull duty. Ben, now if I refer to the UK action, do you know what I'm referring to? Whitney, yes, yeah, you do, Whitney. Question, and if you could just tell us so the record is clear? Whitney, sure. You're referring to the case that took place in the summer of 2020 against the Sun publication and Dan Wooten. Ben, yes. And just to be clear, and that the plaintiff in the action was Mr. Depp, correct? Whitney, correct. Ben, so if I speak about the UK action or the UK trial, you will understand that is what I'm talking about, so we don't have to repeat it each time? Whitney, yes, sir. Ben, okay, after the UK trial, did you discuss the outcome with your sister Amber? Elaine, objection to the form of the question, but go ahead. Whitney, nothing outside what was already published or what we experienced while we were in the UK. Bullshit. Question, can you tell us more specifically what, if anything, you said to your sister Amber about the outcome of the UK trial? Elaine, objection to the form of the question, also calls for hearsay. Go ahead. Whitney, I can't recall every conversation we had regarding it, or if there was many, or if it was said. What? Question, can you recall anything that your sister Amber said to you about the results of the UK action? Elaine, objection to the form of the question. Go ahead. Whitney, I can't recall specifics, no. Ben, can you recall anything generally of what she said to you? Elaine, objection to the form of the question. Go ahead. Whitney, mostly just relief that it was finished. Whitney, you realize your sister did not have to do that, right? None of you had to do that. That was on the Sun and Dan Wooten to protect themselves, not you. Question, did you review any documents in preparation for your deposition here today? Elaine, to the extent that the calls for attorney-client communication or anything at the direction with your counsel, I would instruct you not to answer. If you reviewed any documents outside of that, you may answer. Whitney, I didn't. I did not. Question, did you review any of the transcripts of the testimony from the UK trial? Elaine, objection to the extent that it would call for any attorney-client communication or directions, I would instruct you not to answer. To the extent you did outside of, you may answer. Whitney, nothing. Ben, without asking you to disclose any communications you had with Ms. Bredehoff or any other attorney who represents you, how long in total did you spend preparing for this deposition here this morning? Elaine, to the extent that this seeks any time spent with the attorney-client with your attorneys, I would instruct you not to answer. If you spent time preparing outside any communications with your counsel, you may answer that. Whitney, I did not, only with my counsel. Ben, all right, and I'll just put it on the record because I respectfully disagree with your counsel. If she tells you not to answer, don't answer it, but I'll just put it on the record. How long did you spend meeting with your counsel to prepare for your testimony here today? Elaine, I'm going to object to the extent that it calls for attorney-client communications and work product, and I would instruct you not to answer. Whitney, Ben, Ms. Henriquez, you submitted witness statements in the UK action, correct? Whitney, yes, I did. Ben, and you submitted those witness statements on behalf of the defendant in that case, the son, Dan Wooten, correct? Elaine, objection to the form of the question? Go ahead. Whitney, correct. Ben, you didn't submit those statements on behalf of Mr. Depp, correct? Elaine, objection to the form of the question? Go ahead. Whitney, correct. I did not for Mr. Depp. Ben, and Ms. Henriquez, you also testified in person at the trial in the UK, correct? Elaine, objection to the form of the question? Go ahead. Whitney, I did appear in person, yes. Ben, and in that in-person testimony was also on behalf of the defendants in that case, correct? Elaine, objection to the form of the question? Go ahead. Whitney, yes, I did. Ben, and I'd like to very briefly discuss your witness statements that you submitted in the UK action. Those are the written statements as opposed to your live testimony. You understand that witness statements that you submitted in the UK action were not sworn statements, correct? Elaine, objection to the form of the question. Go ahead. Whitney, I do understand that, yes. Ben, did you personally write those statements? Elaine, objections to the extent that it calls for attorney-client communication or work product, I would instruct you not to answer. But if you did so separate and apart, you may answer. Whitney, I did not. It was with assistance of counsel. Ben, which counsel assisted you in preparing those sworn written statements in the UK action? Elaine, I'm going to object because it calls for attorney-client communications and work product, and I'm going to instruct you not to answer. Ben, well, again, I'm not asking for the substance of the communications. I'm asking for the name of the attorney. Elaine, which I believe is still attorney-client communication and work product, and I would still instruct her not to answer. Ben, all right, we'll mark that part of the transcript. Ben, were you able to use your own words to describe your experience in those witness statements? Elaine, objection to the form of the question, but go ahead if you can answer it. Whitney, yes, I did use my own words. Ben, were you under any time constraints when drafting any of those witness statements? Elaine, I'm going to object to the form of the question, but go ahead. Whitney, I was not. Ben, did you ever tell anyone in words of substance that the witness statements you submitted in the UK actions did not actually accurately reflect your experiences? Elaine, objection to the form of the question, but go ahead. Whitney, I'm sorry, can you please rephrase? Ben, sure. Did you ever tell anyone that the witness statements that you submitted in the UK action were inaccurate in any way? Elaine, same objection, but go ahead. Whitney, there were two, I can't remember. There was a couple of issues or small discrepancies that were addressed in the UK proceedings, one concerning a date, and I believe one concerning the publication that a friend of mine worked at the time. But apart from those two statements or those two, just those two things, I stand by my testimony. Ben, and you've anticipated my next question. You did change some of your written testimony while you were on the stand testifying live in the UK action, correct? Elaine, objection to the form of the question, go ahead. Whitney, the date discrepancy was something that I had realized, not at the very moment that I was on the stand, but while I was giving testimony or in that period when I was giving testimony. She answers like her sister. My God, just, ugh. Ben, and if the technician would kindly call up what we've marked as Exhibit 16 for identification, I will represent to you, while he's pulling it up, that this is your testimony from the July 23rd, 2020, day 13 of your proceedings. And I would like to point to page 2102, which mercifully is on the third page of Exhibit 16, exactly. Let me just read you this for the record. Starting on page 2112, line 18, Justice Nichols said, he was the judge, correct? Whitney, yes, sir. Ben, Justice Nichols, Miss Was, you be careful about not leading. Miss Was, yes. Can you, Miss Henriquez, explain what it is that you would like to say about March 8th, 2013 at paragraph 33? And it says, witness, that's you, correct? Elaine, objection to the form of the question, but go ahead. Whitney, yes, sir. Ben, and you say, so the incident that my statement speaks to, I now attribute to a later date in March, not March 8th. Miss Was, thank you. Shall I go to the next passage, my lord? Justice Nichols, yes. Which is the next paragraph that you want to? And this is you, the witness? So the witness is Whitney. Forgive me, I'm looking for it right now. Where I make specific mention of it is paragraph 37. Miss Was, thank you. What aspect of paragraph 37 would you like to speak to? And then you say, Miss Henriquez, the painting where he wrote Tessivan P, that is actually in reference to a separate painting that he defaced. There were two different paintings, so I wanted clarification. The painting that this evidence speaks to is the portion of my evidence speaks to. Rather, he did not scribble out and say Tessivan P. He simply tried to just burn the back of it. Did I read that correctly? Elaine, objection, improper use of testimony, and I'm going to object to the form of the question. There was varied things within that were inappropriate and also calls for hearsay and some aspects of it, but go ahead and answer. Whitney, I'm sorry, what was the original question? Ben, I can ask you a better question. That part of the passage that I just read to you contained your testimony. Did I read that accurately? Elaine, objection to the form of the question. It's an improper use of testimony and it calls for hearsay, and go ahead. Whitney, did you read it correctly? I see here, yes. Ben, and is what you clarified that passage and I read of your testimony, was that the correction that you referred to a moment ago when you said you made a correction when you were at trial, a correction to your witness statement? Is that true? Elaine, same objection, still improper use of the transcript and also calls for hearsay. Go ahead. Whitney, that is the one of the discrepancy. Yeah, yes. Ben, but you had an opportunity to correct that discrepancy prior to trial, correct? Elaine, objection to the form of the question and to the extent that it calls for legal conclusions or communications with counsel, I will instruct you not to answer if it involves communications with counsel. If you're able to answer it separately, then that. I'm still objecting on the basis that it calls for legal conclusion and to the form of the question. Go ahead. Whitney, if you're instructing me not to answer, I'm following my counsel's advice. Ben, she's not. She's just objecting to form, saying that you're not competent to make a legal conclusion, but I'm not asking for that. I'm asking whether you had an opportunity to correct any misstatement in your written witness statement prior to you taking the stand. True? Elaine, again, to the extent that your answer would involve attorney-client communication, I would instruct you not to answer. If you're able to answer it separate from that, I'm preserving my other objections on legal conclusion, hearsay, but you can still answer. Whitney, I suppose. Ben, but in fact, you never submitted any amendment or correction to any of your written statements, correct? Elaine, objection to the form of the question calls for legal conclusion. Go ahead. Whitney, it was something I hadn't realized. No, you only realized it after everyone said on the stand that you were wrong. Ben, when did you realize that some of the testimony in your sworn witness statement was incorrect? Elaine, objection to the form of the question, but go ahead. I'm going to answer for Whitney. Is when she was sitting in the gallery of the court, of the UK High Court, listening to every single goddamn word people said so they can twist and turn their narrative to suit what they needed. But Whitney said, when I was reviewing other things, when I was looking at stuff on my phone, I can't remember exactly how I came to the conclusion, but at some point I realized I was confusing the paintings. Ben, and Whitney, I can't recall when it was. Ben, when you had that epiphany, how much previous to July 23rd, 2020 was it? Elaine, objection to the form of the question because she's making my client look like a liar, but go ahead. Whitney, I didn't realize it prior to the date. I can't recall the exact date of when it was realized. Ben, it's your testimony that you discovered the discrepancies on the morning of your actual live in-person testimony. Elaine, objection to the form of the question. Go ahead. Whitney, I do not recall when I realized it. I don't think it was that morning. Ben, it would have been. Do you have a ballpark of how many days prior to that testimony did you realize that you made errors under oath? Elaine, objection calls for speculation and hypothetical. Objection to the form of the question. Go ahead. Whitney, again, I can't give you a ballpark or specifics. Ben, putting aside the discrepancies about which you've testified, were there any relevant details omitted from your witness statements? Elaine, objection to the form of the question for a variety of reasons, including your commentary, but also to the fact that this is grossly overboard request and calls for legal conclusions that this witness would not be able to respond to, and also to the extent that it calls for attorney-client communication and work product, that I will instruct you not to answer, but you can answer it if it's outside that. Whitney, I can't, it's too broad. I'm not sure 100% what's being asked exactly, so. Ben, did you include everything important in your sworn witness statement? Elaine, objection to the form of the question, calls for legal conclusion in the term of important, and also to the extent that it would call for any attorney-client communications or work product. I would instruct you not to answer on the basis if it does. To the extent outside of that, you may answer. Whitney, I don't recall. I'm not sure. I still don't know exactly if I'm supposed to do. This is the best of my knowledge. I don't know if it includes every single minuscule detail. There was no way to be able to tell that. Ben, did you intend your sworn witness statement to be complete and accurate? Elaine, objection calls for attorney. That calls for legal conclusion. Ben, no, it doesn't. Elaine, hold on. Ben, no. Elaine, please let me finish my objections. It calls for legal conclusion on what would be relevant or important in the UK Sun trial, and also to the extent that it would call for attorney-client communications or work product on what was asked or what was answered. I would instruct you not to answer, but if you can answer outside of that, you may. Ben, and I would object to the coaching. You can object, but you can't coach. Ben, that question, very simple. Did you intend your sworn written statement submitted in the UK action to be complete and accurate to the best of your knowledge under oath and penalties of perjury? Elaine, and again, I'm going to object that it calls for legal conclusion for the witness, and to the extent that it calls for attorney-client communications or work product, I would instruct you not to answer if that's what would be necessary for you to answer this question. If you can answer it without that, then you may answer. Whitney, I completed it as truthfully and completely as I could in my capacity as a person. Ben, Miss Henriquez, I'd like to shift gears a little bit and ask you a little bit about your childhood and growing up with your sister, Amber Heard. Amber Heard is your older sister, correct? Whitney, yes, sir. Ben, and she is your full sister. That is, you both share the same parents, mother and father, correct? Elaine, objection to the form of the question, but go ahead. Whitney, yeah, she's my full sister. Ben, did you and Amber actually grow up in the same household? Elaine, objection to the form of the question, go ahead. Whitney, yeah, we did. Ben, who lived there with you and Amber? Elaine, objection to the form of the question, go ahead. Whitney, my father, and my late mother. Ben, and your late mother, and I'm sorry about her passing, that was Paige Heard? Whitney, yes, sir. Ben, and your father's still alive, and he's David Heard, correct? Whitney, yes, sir. Ben, did anyone other than your parents and Amber live with you there in the house when you were growing up? Elaine, objection to the form of the question, go ahead. Whitney, on a permanent basis, yes, it was just us four. Ben, did anyone live there on a partial basis? Elaine, objection to the form of the question, go ahead. I'm curious to where he's going with this. Whitney, at one point my grandmother lived with us. That would be my father's mother. She lived with us for a brief period of time. I can't recall specifically how long. I was very young. Another important time was his older sister, who was also called Amber Heard. She lived with us for a brief period of time. Other than that, apart from relatives visiting, or it was just the four of us. Ben, did any of your father's workers ever live with you while you were in the household at any time? Elaine, objection to the form of the question, go ahead. Whitney, yes, I apologize, I forgot. I don't know his name. I believe his first name was Victor? Ben, was Victor the only one of your father's workers who lived with you all in the house for some period of time? Elaine, objection to the form of the question, go ahead. Whitney, from as far as I can recall, yes. Ben, how long did Victor live in the house with you all? Elaine, objection to the form of the question, go ahead. Whitney, I can't recall. Ben, you can't recall how long Victor lived there. Do you recall in what year he lived there or how old you were at the time? Elaine, objection to the form of the question, go ahead. Whitney, I cannot. I'm sorry. Ben, do you, Miss Henriquez, have any other siblings other than Amber? Elaine, objection to the form of the question, go ahead. Whitney, we have an older half-sister. Ben, and what is her name? Whitney, Mara. Ben, how much older is Mara than you and Amber? Whitney, I would say roughly 18 years older than me. She must be 17 or 16 years older than Amber. Ben, she's your father's biological daughter, correct? Whitney, that's correct. Ben, did Mara ever live in the same household with you and Amber? Elaine, objection to the form of the question, go ahead. Whitney, apart from summer visits when she was still at university, she would come and stay with us on breaks, but she never lived with us for an extended period of time. She lived with her mother. Ben, does Mara still have a relationship with your father, David Heard? Elaine, objection to the form of the question and also calls for hearsay, go ahead. Whitney, she does. Ben, is it a close relationship? Elaine, objection to the form of the question, go ahead. Whitney, I couldn't say necessarily. They're close. They speak pretty regularly. You'd have to ask them in terms of their closeness. I wouldn't be able to speak to that. Ben, does Mara have a relationship with your sister Amber? Elaine, objection to the form of the question, go ahead. Whitney, yes. Ben, is it a close relationship? Elaine, objection, form of the question, go ahead. Whitney, yes. Ben, and what do you characterize as close? Elaine, objection to the form of the question, go ahead. Whitney, she's her sister. They speak regularly. Amber and Mara are very supportive of one another. They speak pretty often, from what I understand. But again, you would have to ask them in terms of the degrees of closeness and what makes them close. I can't speak to that. Ben, do you personally have a relationship with Mara? Elaine, objection to the form of the question. Whitney, I do. Ben, when was the last time you spoke with her? Whitney, within the week, less than a week ago. Ben, did you talk about this deposition coming up? Whitney, I did not. We were discussing the birth of my daughter and she was planning on coming out. That's what we spoke about mostly. Ben, when was the last time you saw Mara? Whitney, I went, say, April last year. Ben, how would you describe the household that you and Amber grew up with your parents? Elaine, objection to the form of the question. Whitney, I'm sorry, Mr. Chu. Could you be a little bit more specific? Ben, well, that's fair. Did you have a happy childhood growing up with Amber and your parents in Texas? Elaine, objection to the form of the question. I'm sorry, Miss Chu. I interrupted you. Ben, yeah, let me restate it. Ben, I mean, did you have a happy childhood growing up with your sister and parents in Texas? Elaine, objection to the form of the question. Whitney, it wasn't perfect, but it was very normal. It was family. It was a family dynamic. It had happy moments. It had less than happy moments. I don't know how else to categorize it. I don't think any family dynamic can be just described as simply good or bad, happy or sad. It was a fair mixture of both. Ben, did you at any time experience any physical abuse by anyone in your family, meaning Amber, your father, or your mother? Elaine, objection to the form of the question. Whitney, never at the hands of my mother or my sister, but occasionally our father was rough with us. Ben, when you say your father was rough with us, how was your father, David, rough with you? Elaine, objection to the form of the question. Whitney, we were occasionally struck with objects, hands, belts. There were absolutely times when we were fearful of him, but it was just heavy discipline. Ben, now, I know this is painful, and I'm going to try and go through it quickly, but I want to do it in kind of an organized way. And it's painful, and I understand that, but I want to stick to you right now, and then I'm going to move on to your sister. So, it is your testimony that your father, David, struck you with objects. Is that true? Elaine, objection to the form of the question. Go ahead. Whitney, belts. Ben, okay, anything other than belts that he struck you with? Elaine, objection to the form of the question. Whitney, hands. Ben, anything other than belts and hands? Elaine, objection to the form of the question. Whitney, no. Ben, how often would he hit you with a belt? Elaine, objection to the form of the question. Whitney, I can't recall specifically. Ben, what can you recall generally? Elaine, objection to the form of the question. Whitney, I'm sorry, Mr. Chu. It's not something I can quantify. I can't recall how often it happened, or I'm sorry, I can't recall how often. Ben, I'm not going to dwell on this. I'm just trying to get some sense. Would it be fair to say that he hit you with a belt on more than 5 occasions during your entire childhood? Elaine, objection to the form of the question. Go ahead. Whitney, yes. Ben, did he do that more than 10 times? Elaine, objection to the form of the question. Whitney, I have to say yes. Ben, more than 20 times? Elaine, objection to the form of the question. Whitney, I honestly can't give you a number to this. I apologize. I don't recall. She said, I can't give you a number. Ben, but more than 10, correct? Elaine, objection to the form of the question. Whitney, yes. Ben, so on those occasions where he hit you with a belt, where on your body did he hit you with a belt? Elaine, objection to the form of the question. Whitney, at various points, it wasn't a specific target. Ben, so it was something other than your bottom? Elaine, objection to the form of the question. Whitney, occasionally. Ben, how old were you on the last occasion that he hit you with a belt? Elaine, objection to the form of the question. Whitney, I can't recall my age. I was very young, but I can't recall how old I was. Ben, no, I apologize if I was unclear, and I maybe asked it backwards. So maybe I should ask it this way. How old were you in the first time that he hit you with a belt? Elaine, objection to the form of the question. Whitney, that I absolutely don't recall. Ben, how old were you the last time he hit you with a belt? Elaine, objection to the form of the question. Whitney, I don't recall. Ben, how often did he hit you with his hands? Elaine, objection. We know the drill. Whitney, I don't recall. Ben, more than 10 times as with the belt? Elaine, we know the rule. We know the drill. I'm just going to say Elaine, objection. Whitney, I don't think it was more than 10 times. Ben, it was more than 5 times. Elaine, objection. Whitney, perhaps. Ben, when he hit you with his hands, where did he hit you? Elaine, objection. Whitney, primarily our bottom. Ben, and again, I'm just speaking with you. So he hit you on your bottom. Did he ever hit you with his hands on any other part of your body? Elaine, objection. Whitney, yes. Ben, where did he hit you? Elaine, objection. Whitney, my face. Ben, how many times did he hit your face with his hands? Elaine, objection. Whitney, I don't recall. Ben, more than once? Elaine, objection. Whitney, yes. Ben, more than 5 times? Elaine, objection. Whitney, no. Ben, now moving on to your sister Amber. Did you ever see your father strike Amber with a belt? Elaine, objection. Whitney, yes. Ben, on how many occasions did you see your father strike Amber with a belt? Elaine, objection. Whitney, I can't recall. Ben, more than 5 times? Elaine, objection. Whitney, yes. Ben, more than 10 times? Elaine, objection. Whitney, I don't recall. Ben, did you ever see your father, David Heard, hit Amber with his hands? Elaine, objection. Whitney, yes. Ben, how many times did he hit her with his hands? Elaine, objection. Whitney, I can't recall. Ben, was it more than 5 times? Elaine, objection. Whitney, I can't recall. Ben, other than hitting her with, where on the part of her body did your father hit Amber? Elaine, objection. Whitney, on her bottom, yeah. Ben, did he also hit her on other parts of her body? Elaine, objection. Whitney, no, not that I can recall. Ben, well, you testified that he hit you in the face. Did he ever hit Amber in the face? Elaine, objection. Whitney, I do recall him hitting me in the face. I do not recall him hitting her in the face. Ben, so you don't know whether he might have broken her nose when he hit her in the face? Elaine, objection. Whitney, I've never seen him hit her in the face. Question, did you ever witness your father hitting your mother with his hands, with a belt, or any other object? Elaine, objection. Whitney, I never witnessed him strike my mother. I once witnessed him push her against a fridge, but I have not seen him strike her, no. Ben, was she injured from your father pushed her against the fridge? Elaine, objection. Whitney, I don't recall. I was very young. Ben, how tall a man is your father? Elaine, objection. Whitney, I believe he's about 6'2" at his prime. He's now probably closer to 6 feet. Ben, how much did he weigh at the time when you were growing up? Elaine, objection. Whitney, I have no way of knowing how much he weighed. Ben, do you know how much he weighs now? Elaine, objection. Whitney, I do not. I don't know how much my father weighs. Yeah. Ben, when you were a kid, when you were a child, would you characterize him as thin, heavy, or about normal? Elaine, objection. Whitney, I would say he was very average. He's slightly heavier now, but I think growing up, he fell into a very average category. Ben, so at 6'2", tall and average, it would be fair to say he was probably between 190 to 200 pounds. Elaine, objection to the form of the question, calls for speculation, hypothetical. Whitney, I'm sorry, I'm bad with quantifying that stuff. I wouldn't be able to tell you with any certainty how much he might have weighed. Ben, but he was a big guy. Elaine, objection. Whitney, bigger than us, for sure. Ben, yeah. Did your mother ever tell you that her husband, your father, had physically abused her, hit her? Elaine, objection. Whitney, no, she never did. Ben, did you ever witness any other physical abuse in your household other than what you've just described for us? Elaine, objection. Whitney, no. Ben, did you and Amber ever have physical fights when you were growing up as kids, living with your parents in Texas? Elaine, objection. Whitney, when we were young children, I have less memory of any sort of like physical spats, but I'm told that we were like other younger kids, but I don't recall specific incidents of anything. But we were very close in age. We're only a year apart, a little more than a year apart. But no, I don't recall specific incidences, but we're just two sisters like any other. Ben, growing up, did either of your parents have a substance or abuse issues? Elaine, objection. Whitney, yes. Ben, and what substance abuse, if any, did your father have? Elaine, objection. Whitney, alcohol, various prescriptions medication. As far as like illegal substances, I wouldn't be able to say with any certainty if that was a thing when we were children, but I know for sure, at least while we were in the house, it was alcohol and prescription medication. Ben, what is it, and it is your opinion sitting here today that your father abused alcohol and prescription medication? Elaine, objection to the form of the question, calls for speculation, hypothetical, and expertise. Whitney, yes. Ben, how often would your father abuse alcohol? Elaine, objection. Whitney, he had various bouts of sobriety, but it was just on and off. I couldn't quantify a specific number for you because there were periods where he was sober for a number of years and then periods where he wasn't, so it's all hard for me to quantify. Ben, did his abuse of alcohol coincide with the times that he would hit you with his hands or belt? Elaine, objection. Whitney, yes. Ben, and with respect to his abuse of prescription medication, was that a constant problem or was that just a problem at certain times? Elaine, objection. Whitney, that one's a little harder for me to recall because just the nature of taking a pill is so much less obvious than taking a drink. So I wouldn't be able to say with any certainty the duration or time that was an issue. Ben, and that's a fair point. Did your father's abuse of alcohol also coincide with the times where he hit your sister with his hands or with a belt? Elaine, objection. Whitney, are you asking if his alcohol contributed to those incidences? Ben, yes. Whitney, I would have to agree. Ben, did your mother have any substance abuse problems in your observation? Elaine, objection. Whitney, yes. Ben, and what substances did she abuse? Elaine, objection. Whitney, alcohol primarily. Ben, anything else? Elaine, objection. Whitney, not that I can recall. Ben, how often in your recollection did your mother abuse alcohol, drink to excess? Elaine, objection. Whitney, my mother actually never did. I've never seen her drunk. To the day she died, she never drank in excess. She just drank a good amount, though, throughout the day, but I never saw her inebriated or unsteady on her feet or anything like that. Ben, did either your mother or your father ever serve alcohol to you or Amber while you were under the age of 18? Elaine, objection. Whitney, no. Ben, growing up, was it the first time that you saw your sister Amber consume alcohol? When was the first time you saw your sister consume alcohol? Elaine, objection. Whitney, I don't recall when that was or how old we were. Ben, and putting aside how old you are, what type of alcohol did you see her consume? Elaine, objection. Whitney, I honestly can't recall. I don't know. Ben, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to step over you. When was the first time you saw Amber consume a non-prescription drug? Elaine, objection. Whitney, I can't recall. Ben, so you don't know how old she was at the time? Elaine, objection. Whitney, I don't recall incidents of seeing my sister take drugs I don't recall. Ben, what non-prescription drugs have you seen Amber use? Elaine, objection. Whitney, in the entirety of how long I've known her? Ben, yes. I'm broadening out now, yes. Elaine, objection. Whitney, I'm sorry, what illegal drugs have I seen her consume? Ben, yes. Elaine, objection. Whitney, I've seen her take MDMA. I've seen her take mushrooms on occasion, cocaine when we were much younger, but other than that, I can't recall anything else. Ben, have you ever seen her use methamphetamines? Elaine, objection. Whitney, no. Ben, and you said that you've seen her use cocaine. How many times have you seen your sister use Whitey stuff? Elaine, objection. Whitney, very minimal. I would say much less than 5 times. And so Whitney goes on, I don't have much experience with that at all with her. I think that's a porcupine right there. Anyway, my water's just like sloshed in me and said, whew, lie. Ben, just to be clear, your testimony is that you've seen her use Whitey stuff, correct? Elaine, objection. Whitney, a very, very, very long time ago when we were first moved out here, we were still teenagers technically. Ben, and on how many occasions were you with her when she used Whitey stuff? Elaine, objection. Whitney, I couldn't tell you. It was, like I said, it was very, very few. But it's possible she used Whitey stuff when we were not with her, correct? Oh, sorry, Ben. But it's possible that she used Whitey stuff when you were not with her, correct? Elaine, objection. Whitney, sure. Ben, have you ever seen her use Mary Jane? Elaine, objection. Whitney, I can't recall seeing her witnessing it personally. I know she has smoked Mary Jane at one point or another, but I personally have never witnessed it. Ben, and how many times have you seen her use psychedelic mushrooms? Elaine, objection. Whitney, that's also I think personally, I've only seen it once or twice. Ben, but it's possible she could have used it on other occasions when you did not actually witness it, correct? Elaine, objection. Calls for speculation. Hypothetical. Whitney, I suppose. Ben, when Amber was in alcohol, did she have a friend? I read alcohol and it's actually school. When Amber was in school, did she have a friend named Caitlin? Elaine, objection. Whitney, I'm trying to remember. My apologies. That sounds familiar, yes? Ben, was Caitlin a friend of Amber's from school? Elaine, objection. Whitney, if memory serves, yes. Ben, do you know had you finished your answer or not? Whitney, I was just saying, if it's the same person I'm thinking of, then yes, they were classmates, I believe. Ben, do you know how old Amber and Caitlin were when they became friends? Elaine, objection to the form of the question. Whitney, I wouldn't be able to tell you definitely. No. Ben, did Caitlin ever come to your house? Elaine, objection. Whitney, I can't recall, honestly. I'm sorry, I don't know. Again, if it's the same person I'm thinking of, I might have seen her at the house, but I don't know if she spent the night or anything. Ben, did there come a time when Amber and Caitlin had a falling out? Elaine, objection. Whitney, I don't know. You would have to ask her. Ben, did your sister ever tell you about having a falling out with Caitlin? Elaine, objection. Whitney, not that I can recall. Ben, did you ever speak with Caitlin about any falling out between her and your sister Amber? Elaine, objection. Whitney, I would have to say no. I'm not even 100% sure if I remember who this person is. Ben, was Amber also friends with someone named Logan? Elaine, objection. Whitney, yes. Ben, who's Logan? Of course, Elaine is all over this one. Objection. Whitney, Logan was a dear friend of, he initially started off as Amber's friends. They worked together at the pool, I believe. They were both lifeguards, and he very quickly got close with us and our family. He had passed away in a car accident. Ben, how old was he when he met Amber? Elaine, objection. Whitney, I don't recall. I don't know that. I don't know the answer to that. Ben, well, he was older than Amber, wasn't he? Elaine, objection. Whitney, I'm actually not sure. Ben, and did there come a time when Amber and Logan's relationship became romantic? Elaine, objection. Whitney, not to my knowledge. Ben, you mentioned that Logan passed away. When did he pass away? Elaine, objection. Whitney, I don't recall when it was specifically. Ben, do you know how old Logan was when he died? Whitney, I couldn't say with 100% certainty. I believe 17 or 18 maybe. I'm not sure actually. Ben, how old was Amber when he passed away? Elaine, objection to the form of the question. Whitney, I don't know. Ben, do you ever observe Amber and Logan fighting? Elaine, objection. Whitney, no. Ben, did Amber ever tell you that she was with Logan at the time he passed away? Elaine, objection. Whitney, that was not my understanding. Ben, and it is your understanding that Logan passed away in a car accident? Elaine, objection. Whitney, yes. Ben, did Amber ever tell you in words or substance that she was driving the car at the time he died? Elaine, objection. Whitney, no. Ben, was Amber with Logan when he passed away? Elaine, objection. Whitney, no. Ben, how did Amber react when Logan passed away? Elaine, objection. Whitney, she was devastated. He was her best friend. Ben, did Amber drop out of school after he passed away? Elaine, objection. Whitney, it was at some point after Logan passed away, but it wasn't a result of that, no. Ben, was your sister Amber's driver's license suspended after Logan passed away? Elaine, objection, calls for hearsay. Whitney, I believe it was before. I can't recall with certainty, but I believe it was before. Ben, so just to be clear, it's your understanding that there came a time when Amber's driver's license was suspended, true? Elaine, I'm going to object to the form of the question, calls for hearsay speculation. Whitney, if memory serves, I think at one point it was. Ben, do you know why it was suspended? Elaine, objection. Whitney, I do not. Ben, you don't know one way or another whether it had anything to do with the accident in which Logan died. Is that true? Elaine, objection, asked and answered. Whitney, it was. It had nothing to do with that. Ben, did Amber ever drive the car? Strike that. Did Amber ever drive the car during the period of time when her driver's license was suspended? Elaine, objection, calls for speculation, hypothetical. Whitney, yes. After receiving my driver's license, I had been in an accident, and it was very close to our house, and she was the only one that was able to come. And it was my first accident, and I was very shaken up and scared, and she came to drive us back to our house. Ben, and the time she did that, your understanding was that her driver's license had been suspended. Is that correct? Elaine, objection. Whitney, I might have known about it at the time. I can't recall if I knew about it or for sure. I was like I said, it was my first accident. I was so shaken up. I don't know if I was thinking clearly. Ben, did she ever get her driving privilege restored? Elaine, objection. Whitney, yes. Ben, okay, let's move on to a different subject. When did Amber move out of your parents' house? Whitney, what year or? Ben, well, how old was she? What year was it? Elaine, objection. Whitney, I want to say she was 17, maybe younger. I don't know. Ben, and you still living with your parents when Amber moved out at approximately 17, correct? Whitney, yes. Elaine, objection to the form of the question. Ben, do you know why Amber moved out at that time? Elaine, objection to the form of the question, calls for hypothetical, speculation, and hearsay. Whitney, I don't know. You would have to ask her if there was a specific reason. Ben, where did she go to live after she moved out at age 17? Elaine, objection. Whitney, I know what city. She came out here to Los Angeles, but I don't know where specifically. Ben, when she first came to Los Angeles after leaving your parents' house, did she go live with someone or did she live alone? Elaine, objection. Whitney, I honestly can't recall if she had. I can't recall. Ben, do you know whether she lived with a boyfriend? Whitney, no. Elaine, objection. Ben, how did Amber support herself when she went out here to live in Los Angeles at age 17? Elaine, objection to the form of the question, calls for hypothetical, speculation, and hearsay, and other reasons. Whitney, I don't know. I wasn't out here. I didn't speak to her every day. I'm not sure specifically how. Ben, did your sister Amber ever live in New York? Elaine, objection. Whitney, I don't know. Ben, you don't know one way or the other. Elaine, same objection. Whitney, I don't believe so. I know she had gone out there, but I don't think she lived there for a significant period of time. Ben, when did you move out of your parents' house in Texas? Whitney, after graduating high school in 2006. Ben, why did you move out at that time? Elaine, objection to the form of the question. Whitney, to get out of Austin. I was attending school out here. Just sounded great. I just wanted to be here. Ben, and when did you go, where did you go live once you moved out of your parents' house? Elaine, objection. Whitney, Amber and I lived together here in Los Angeles. We had an apartment that we shared with one other person. Ben, and where was that in Los Angeles? Whitney, Hancock Park. Ben, who was the third person with who you and Amber lived? Whitney, her name was Lisa. Ben, how old were you when you went to Los Angeles to live with your sister Amber and Lisa? Whitney, 17 or 18. Ben, how did you support yourself while the three of you were living together? How did you support yourself? Elaine, objection. Whitney, my maternal grandparents had, before they passed, they set up an educational trust fund, and that as long as I was in school, I received a really small allowance so I didn't have to work. I eventually did start working various retail jobs, embarrassingly at Abercrombie & Finch at one point. And then when I turned, by the time I was 21, I was able to get a job at a hotel. But yeah, other than that, just minimal jobs here and there. Ben, do you remember Lisa's last name? Elaine, objection. Whitney, I'm sorry because I should know that, but I can't recall it at this moment. Ben, did there come a time when you ever returned to living with your parents? Elaine, objection. Whitney, not as a permanent resident, but again, because I was attending, I'm so sorry. I do occasionally have to stand up. Sorry for this if this is disrupting, but I do. I just have to stand up really quickly. Sorry. Ben, no. Would you like to take a quick break? It's no problem at all. Whitney, oh, no. I'm okay. I just need to get up and stretch my legs and back real quick. What was the question? So the question was, her answer was, I was in school. I studied for the first few years. I was out there. So for academic breaks, like summer break, winter break, I would occasionally go back to visit, but I never moved back in once I moved out. Ben, now I want to broaden the lens a little bit to a wide open time frame. I take it there have been times when you and Amber have had arguments. Elaine, objection. Whitney, yeah. Ben, and for example, when you were first living with her in Los Angeles, how often would you all get into arguments? Elaine, objection. Whitney, I couldn't tell you how many times, but we're sisters. As I mentioned before, we're super close. It's very common for sisters to argue. I wouldn't be able to tell you how many times. Ben, and again, this is another broad question, but I'll ask it anyways. What types of things would you argue with her about? Elaine, objection. Whitney, silly things in retrospect, like who borrowed whose jacket, or I can't remember arguing about anything significant especially when we were first living together. Ben, and now you, broadening it beyond just the time when you were living together, when you were very young, in any arguments you have had with Amber over the entire period of your lives, has she ever been physically violent with you? Elaine, objection. Ever hit you in any way or thrown something at you? Elaine, objection. Whitney, no. Ben, she's never hit you. Whitney, no. Ben, she's never slapped you. Whitney, no. Ben, she's never thrown anything at you. Whitney, no. I find that very, very hard to believe, Whitney. Ben, have you and your sister Amber not spoken for a period of time because you had had a fight or disagreement? Elaine, objection. Whitney, yeah, there were periods of time when we weren't on speaking terms or we weren't as close to one another as we might have been previously due to an argument or disagreement. Ben, how many times can you remember where there was a hiatus, of communications between the two of you? Elaine, objection to the form of the question. Whitney, I wouldn't be able to recall specifically how many times. Ben, putting aside the number of times this happened, do you remember the duration of those periods of times? How long it was between communications between the two sisters? Elaine, objection. Whitney, different times for different situations. Generally very short. I'd say the periods of time that were extensive or significant were fewer. Probably more commonplace would just be a few days of not speaking to her. Ben, do you recall, and when you do renew communication, was it one or the other of you who would try to make peace? Elaine, objection. Whitney, that was very, very largely dependent on the situation, whatever the argument might have been about initially. I would say it was probably a fair number of times on both parts where it was either reconciling on my part or reconciling on her part. But again, it was mostly dependent on the situation. Ben, and I was wondering, do you recall a period of time in 2015 when you and Amber were estranged and not communicating? Elaine, objection. Whitney, yes. Ben, and when did that happen? Elaine, objection. Whitney, hard to say when it started. There was not a certain date. It started in March. Blah, 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 blah. It wasn't specific. She blah, blah, blah'd over the best part. I wish I could narrow it down for you, but I can't recall specifically when it started. Ben, well, putting aside when it started, how long did the impasse last? How long were you not speaking? Elaine, objection. Whitney, to the best of my recollection, a couple of months maybe. Ben, so what caused the impasses? You know what? Elaine's objecting to everything. I'm just going to skip over them. Whitney, it was a combination of things, but one of the reasons that got, I guess, held on to, or one of the reasons that it cited was that they accused me of leaking information to the media, selling information which was absolutely untrue. And seeing everything in hindsight now, it absolutely was not. It was just another tactic to separate Amber. There was no truth to it. There was no validity to it. It was something that it was used just to separate Amber and I. Oh, really? That's what Amber would have you believe. Ben, okay, let's unpack that if we can. When you say that they accused you of leaking to the media, what do you mean by the pronoun they? Who are they? Whitney, Amber and Johnny have believed that I was doing that. Ben, what did they believe you were leaking to the media? Whitney, just that they were accusing me of leaking stories to the media about their wedding or various things that came out in the press. But again, I vehemently denied that. I never did anything of the sort. Ben, when you say that they accused you, it was Johnny, your brother-in-law, or was it your sister Amber who made that accusation that you were leaking those things to the media? Elaine, objection. And here's the thing. I'm thinking that it was Amber. Johnny wasn't pleased with it, so Amber just blamed her sister. That's exactly how I saw that scenario unfolding, because not once for a second do I think Johnny was leaking his own shit. He's never done it before. He's not doing it now. Oh my God. Anyway. Whitney, it was Johnny initially, and he had convinced Amber. Oh, no. Ben, okay. How did Johnny express to you that he thought you were leaking to the media? Whitney, it was never made completely clear to me how that conclusion was drawn, only that in digging and investigating, I don't know if that was meant to imply that he had hired investigators or what. I actually don't know, but he claimed that he had it investigated and all of these leaks somehow tracked back to me and my friend Sarah. Ben, did he tell you that directly? Did he say that to you in words or substance? Whitney, I think you leaked to the media. Whitney, yes, we did talk about it at one point. We were on the couch at one of the penthouses, and he also postured it as like giving it the possibility that I just happened to say the wrong thing to the wrong person, and it spun out. But he himself did absolutely have a conversation with me about it. That made no fucking sense. Ben, and when you say at the penthouse, are you referring to the penthouse at the ECB? Whitney, yes, sir. Ben, and because you were going to be talking about that later, just so we can get through this quickly and get you back to other things. So if I were to say ECB, we both know what we're talking about. Is that okay? Whitney, yes. Ben, so when Johnny was sitting on the sofa with you, kind of raising the issue with you, was your sister Amber in the room as well, or was it just you and Johnny? Whitney, it was primarily just Johnny and I, but again, the layout of Penthouse 3 specifically was very open. So if somebody were in the kitchen, they could pretty easily hear the conversations that were happening in the sofa in the living room versus if you were up in the mezzanine level of Penthouse 3. Yeah, Penthouse 3 or even the upper, but it was pretty open space. So periodically, Amber would come in and out of the kitchen, but the conversation was mostly Johnny and I. Ben, so it was fair to say that Amber was within earshot of your conversation with Johnny about the leaks? Whitney, she might have been, but again, I don't. My memory of that conversation, she was not present. Ben, did she participate in any way? Did she come in at any point in the jurisdiction and weigh in or make any kind of comment? Whitney, no. Ben, and how do you know that your sister Amber came to the same belief that Mr. Depp had? Whitney, her and I spoke separately about it. Ben, and when did that conversation take place in relation to your conversation with Johnny in Penthouse 3? Whitney, at some point prior to my conversation with Johnny, I spoke to Amber about it first and then had a conversation with Johnny after at some point. Ben, so what did Amber say to you in that conversation? Whitney, to the best of my recollection, she had She had said that, Johnny's team had these leaks investigated. She didn't say by whom. She didn't say over what period of time. And she basically, Whit, it all comes back to you. Either you're selling these stories or you're just telling the wrong person. But Johnny and I are very hurt. As has been stated many times, privacy was of the utmost importance to them. So absolutely no accusation like that for them was huge. But again, it was she had brought it up to me in terms of, Johnny had this issue investigated. Ben, how did you respond when your sister said that she and Johnny believed that you had done this based on the research done by his team? Whitney, I was completely flabbergasted. I knew it wasn't true. I knew I hadn't sold anything. I knew I hadn't maliciously told anybody anything. I think that's part of the reason why they, hinged a lot of that on my friend, that they ended up citing as the source, because it was also really implied that it could have been me just telling the wrong person the wrong thing, but I was very shocked. Ben, how did the impasse end? Whitney, by impasse, do you mean how did that conversation end, or how did it? Ben, no, it's a bad question. I'll withdraw the question. So you were very hurt by this accusations, I take it? Whitney, of course. Ben, and so your sister didn't speak for, and correct me if I'm wrong, you said about 2 months, is that correct? Whitney, I don't believe I said 2 months. It was a number of months, but I don't know if it was 2. I couldn't tell you with any certainty if it was 2 or 5 or 4, but it was a period of time. Ben, so there was a period of months in which you had no communications with your sister Amber, correct? Whitney, little to none. Ben, how did you resume normal communication if you did? Whitney. I had growing concerns about what was happening. I had a lot of anxiety surrounding not being near her, not being in support of her, not being in her life. I eventually reached out to see if we could reconcile and have, a conversation to kind of clear the air. But it was a mutual desire to do so. Ben, but in the point of fact, you were the one who reached out to her. Is that fair to say? Whitney, it was very mutual, but I do remember reaching out to her at one point or another. Ben, and at some point, she, grasped the extended hand. In other words, she agreed to start communicating with you again. Is that what happened? Whitney, yes. Ben, why don't we take, if you don't mind, I'm about to show you a series of documents, so it might be a good time to take a break for a 10-minute. Okay, so they're taking a 10-minute break. And they're back. Ben, Miss Henriquez, before we go through the documents quickly, I just want to ask a follow-up question about Logan. What's Logan's last name? Whitney, I'm sorry, I don't recall his surname. Ben, all right. Let's please show the witness Exhibit 1. Miss Henriquez, own production, Bates number, blah, blah, blah. Miss Henriquez, do you recognize this document? Whitney, I'm sorry, do I have the ability to make it larger? It's very small. I have trouble seeing. Question. These are texts between you and Mr. Depp that you produced to us in Discovery, correct? Whitney, yes. Ben, this isn't that complicated. Is the phone number next to Whit Heard the phone number you had in February of 2014? Ben, Elaine, you have been making speaking objections and stalling, and we don't want to have to bring your client back, but we're going to because this is important witness. You know it. I know it. The judge knows it. We're not going to have any more stalling. Elaine, are you finished? Ben, Miss Henriquez, is the phone number next to Whit Heard the phone number you had in February of 2014? Whitney, yes. Ben, do you see where it says Mr. Hop next to recipients? Whitney, yes, I do see that. Ben, who is Mr. Hop? Whitney, that's Johnny. Ben, why do you call Johnny Mr. Hop? Whitney, it was just one of the many silly nicknames I had for him. Ben, and you also called him Hammer, correct? Whitney, correct. Hammer, Hammerhead, various nicknames. Why did you call him Hammer or Hammerhead? Whitney, it was kind of a long, not so clear story, but there was a really funny viral video that was going around kind of around the time that Amber and Johnny started dating. And there was a funny line in there where the little cartoon lizard says, "I'm Johnny Hammerhead, Mr. Hammer Sticks." And whatever, it just kind of became of a joke, and I called him Hammerhead as a result of that silly video. Ben, fair to say that was an affectionate nickname, correct? Whitney, correct. Ben, do you see the text message that reads, quote, "Last time Sis and I got into it, you convinced me to go and face Amber and the issues at hand when all I wanted to do was run away." Do you see that? It's right there in the middle of your response to him. Whitney, last time Sis, yeah, I see it. Last time Sis and I got into it, you convinced me to go face her and the issues at hand when all I want to do is run away. I see that, yeah. Ben, and this is a text message that you sent to Mr. Depp, correct? Whitney, correct. Ben, and you refer to sis. You referring to your sister Amber, true? Whitney, this is true. Ben, what do you mean here that you and Amber got into it? Whitney, I can't recall specifically. I'm assuming that's in reference to the argument we might have had or a squabble. Ben, and that's a squabble between you and Amber, true? Whitney, as I recall. Correct, that's what I would take this to mean. Ben, okay. Let's move on to Exhibit 2. And I'm going to start here on the second page. I'd like to ask to review the second page because that's all I'm asking you about. Whitney, I'm just having difficulty actually making the print larger. I'm sorry. Ben, so maybe the technician can help you move it. Okay. They're just trying to get it all sorted. Oh, she has the right to review what you put in front of her and you know that. Ben, she does not have the right for you to coach her unmercifully. Elaine, I'm not coaching and the record speaks for itself. She has the right to review. Ben, all right, stop. Just stop. Elaine, the entire exhibit. Ben, stop. Please stop that we can get through this. Elaine, Mr. Chu, I'm going to object to your being abusive to me. Ben, I'm objecting to your use of the abuse in a case where your client has falsely alleged abuse. Elaine, I think the record speaks for itself. Oh, shit. Ben, Miss Henriquez, I'm directing your attention to the document produced, second page of Exhibit 2. Do you see where it says, quote, look, you know I have a pretty good understanding of what it is you're going through right now. Believe me, I've been there with her. Obviously not the same capacity, but I know it's what it's like to want to run away for days and do my own thing and having Amber there fighting with you, unquote. Did I read that correctly? Whitney, I just got to it, so forgive me. Okay, it is. Ben, did I read the first 5 lines of that text correctly? Whitney, correct. Ben, and this is a text message that you sent to Mr. Depp, correct? Whitney, correct. Ben, what are you referring to here? Whitney, I would need to see the context of the rest of the conversation to get a better idea. Ben, what you said, what would you... Whitney, I just want to understand fully before I answer. Ben, what did you mean when you said I've been there with her? Whitney, that I've been in arguments with Amber before. Ben, and what do you mean when you said, quote, I know what it's like to want to run away for days and do my own thing and having Amber there fighting with you. Whitney, if you could please allow me to read the rest of the conversation, I think it would help me give a context because I want to answer fully, okay? Ben, so my question was, what do you mean when you said, quote, I know what it's like to want to run away for days to do my own thing and have Amber there fighting with you, unquote? Whitney, meaning not want to deal with the problem, not want to face the issue at hand, not physically run away, sure, but I think I was speaking more about metaphorically, wanting to not address the problem right away because it's harder to sit there and address the problem than it is to run away and avoid it. Ben, have you had to run away from a fight with Amber in the past? Whitney, I wouldn't say that I had to. There have been times following an argument that I chose to leave for the reasons that I just mentioned, that instead of taking the harder route of talking it out and understanding what went wrong, it was easier to physically or metaphorically leave the situation. I would say I had as much as it was, I wouldn't say that I had to as much as it was my choice to leave at certain points. Ben, and how did Anna respond when you ran away from her? Whitney, I wouldn't say she was ever very happy about it. Amber always wants to understand something. Amber wants to work things out. She's not the person to just run away from a problem, ever. So for me, at least in my experience or arguments with her, she wasn't happy when I left situations. Ben, when you say she wasn't very happy, she was angry, wasn't she? Whitney, I wouldn't say angry as much as frustrated or sad. Ben, okay, let's pivot before we go to some more documents. I've asked you about your sister's drug use. I'm going to ask you just a few questions about your own. Have you ever used non-prescription drugs? Whitney, yes, I have. Ben, how old were you when you first used a non-prescription drug? Whitney, are we including Mary Jane? Ben, well, why don't we just take them one by one? Have you ever used Whitey stuff? Whitney, yes. Ben, how many times have you used Whitey stuff? Whitney, I wouldn't be able to quantify how many times. Ben, more than 10? Whitney, yes. More than 20? Whitney, yes. More than 30? Whitney, if I had to guess, it was more than 30 times. Ben, how old were you when you first started Whitey stuff? Whitney, I was already living here, so it had to have been after I was 17 or 18. Ben, were you ever addicted to Whitey stuff? Whitney, I wouldn't say so, no. Ben, when was the last time you used Whitey stuff? Whitney, I honestly can't recall. Ben, have you ever used methamphetamine? Whitney, no. Ben, have you ever used MDMA? Whitney, yes. How many times? Whitney, I'd have to say more than 5 times. How old were you when you first used MDMA? Whitney, again, I already living out here, so it'd have to have been after I was 17 or 18. I can't tell you specifically how old I was. Ben, have you ever done psychedelic drugs like mushrooms? Whitney, I have done mushrooms, yes. Ben, okay, have you ever used Whitey stuff with your sister? Whitney, as I stated earlier, once or twice when we were much younger. Ben, how about MDMA? Have you ever used MDMA with Amber? Whitney, I don't recall actually using it at the same time as she. Ben, what about psychedelic drugs or mushrooms? Whitney, once, I believe. Ben, when was the last time you did any non-prescription drugs with your sister? Whitney, I want to say the island. I think it was one of the island trips. Ben, do you have a ballpark of what year that might have been? Whitney, I don't. Ben, all right, let's move on to the subject of your sister's relationship with Johnny Depp. When did you first learn that Amber was in a romantic relationship with him? Whitney, hard for me to say with any certainty what year it was. It was sometime after when we were living on Orange together at some point, but I couldn't tell you off the top of my head what year that was. Ben, setting aside when it was, how did you learn that your sister and Johnny were in a romantic relationship? Whitney, it would have been a conversation, I'm sure, but in terms of what was specifically said, I can't recall how I became to learn. Ben, and there did come a time when you actually met Mr. Depp? Whitney, yes. Ben, and during the period of your sister's relationship and then marriage with Mr. Depp, did you consider yourself close to him? Whitney, Johnny and I became very close very quickly into their relationship, yes. Ben, and you had nicknames for each other, for him, like Hammer? Whitney, yes. Or Hammerhead or Mr. Hop, right? Whitney said yes. Ben, have you ever done non-prescription drugs with Mr. Depp? Whitney, yes. Ben, and what drugs have you done with Mr. Depp? Whitney, primarily Whitey stuff. I can't recall any other illegal drugs we've done together. Ben, when was the first time you and Mr. Depp did Whitey stuff together? Whitney, I can't recall a specific year or time frame, unfortunately, but I remember we were, but I don't know what year it was or when it was. Ben, was your sister Amber ever present there when you did Whitey stuff with Johnny Depp? Whitney, I don't recall if she was in the room, or I don't recall if she was there or not, no. She might have been, but... Ben, I'm sorry for interrupting. When was the last time you did Whitey stuff with Johnny Depp? Whitney, I don't recall the last time I did it with him. Ben, was Amber there as well? Whitney, no. The last time I remember was on a plane when it was just him and I. Yeah, I don't know who else was on the plane, but I know Amber wasn't there. Ben, when you did Whitey stuff, would you use a tampon applicator to store the Whitey stuff? Whitney, yes. Ben, and you used Whitey stuff before you met Mr. Depp? True? Whitney, yes. Ben, so you would use a tampon applicator to consume Whitey stuff before you met Mr. Depp, right? Whitney, correct. And as I said in the UK, it was a trick that I had shown him. And have you ever taken any drugs that were actually prescribed to Mr. Depp? Whitney, no. Ben, do you recall asking Mr. Depp to give you Adderall pills that he had been prescribed to him? Whitney, I don't recall asking him for Adderall. I have my own prescription at one point, so I don't know why I would ask him. Ben, did you ever take any of Mr. Depp's Adderall pills without first asking him? Whitney, no. Ben, okay, did you ever take any other drugs that had been prescribed to him for Mr. Depp, correct? Whitney, no, I have never taken his medication. Ben, okay, all right. Now that we're going to talk about what we call the painting incident of March 2013. So if you could please look at what's been marked Exhibit 3. And again, I'm just going to ask you about one section that relates to this one incident. This is your witness statement from the UK. And the first thing I'm going to ask you to do is to turn to page 20, please, and let me know if that's your signature. Whitney, yes. Ben, and do you recognize this document as your witness statement? Whitney, yes, this page. Ben, okay, now I'm just going to ask you about what you describe as the painting incident. I'm not going to ask you about anything else in this document. So it's on page 9 of this document. In the middle of the page, it says painting incident, March 8th, 2013. Do you see that? Elaine objected, but Whitney said, I can. Ben, okay, now you describe an incident here that allegedly occurred at Amber's apartment, correct? So the question was, in this witness statement, you described under oath an incident here that allegedly occurred at Amber's apartment, correct? Whitney, may I make it larger? The painting incident, yes, it was actually at our home at the time on Orange, yes. Ben, and this is an apartment where you live with Amber and Lisa, is that correct? Whitney, no, sir, it was a house, and it was the time when it was just Amber and I living at the house. Ben, gotcha. And this alleged incident occurred before going to the set of Keith Richards' documentary Mr. Depp was working on, true? Whitney, yes. Ben, and you testified at the UK trial. You changed your testimony about this incident, right? Whitney, the dates were and the painting, I believe. Ben, right. And that's what we're talking about at this very beginning of the deposition. Whitney, uh-huh. Ben, when I showed you Exhibit 16, you recall that, correct? Whitney, yes. Ben, and you testified that part of your actual live testimony at the UK action that this incident actually occurred on March 22nd, 2013, right? Whitney, it was later in March. I can't recall specifically. Ben, and you've already told us you can't exactly remember when you realized that you had made a mistake, correct? Whitney, correct. I wouldn't be able to tell you when I realized it. Ben, and other than the date, is there anything else about this incident that you testified to in your witness statement that you believe sitting here today was incorrect? Whitney, the painting themselves were the ones that I mixed up. There are two different paintings that were defaced. In my memory mixed the two paintings up. So instead of the one that said Van Ree that was changed to Van P, it was actually a different painting that looked like flamingo or cherries. Then, and to be clear, you didn't actually witness any physical altercation between Mr. Depp and Amber Heard on March 8th, 2013, correct? Whitney, again, March 8th isn't the correct date, but on either instance, I did not witness violence on those dates. Ben, great, thank you. Now let's move on to Exhibit 4. And I will just represent, while the technician is queuing up, that these are more texts that you produced between you and Johnny Depp. Okay. And unlike the emails, they actually go in the proper order. Okay, Ben. So if I could just show you the first page of this, these are text messages between you and Amber from March 22nd, 2013, correct? Whitney, it's really, really small. Okay. Question, no, you're absolutely entitled to that. Okay. Question, okay. And these first messages on this page with Amber start a little after 12:30 p.m., true? Whitney, true. Ben, fair to say that you and Amber were not in the same place at the time you were texting each other? Whitney, I would assume so. Ben, and it does appear that Amber was at the apartment in Orange at the time of the text? Whitney, I don't know where she was when she sent these messages. Ben, where were you? Whitney, I can't recall. Ben, did you wake up at the Orange apartment that morning? Whitney, it's possible I wasn't there at the time. I was seeing somebody. I might have been at his apartment, so I can't say for certain where I was. Ben, and at the time you had this exchange with your sister, when was the last time you had seen Amber? Whitney, I can't recall. Ben, and when was the last time you had seen Johnny Depp? Whitney, I don't know when the last time was or when the last time I saw either of them was. Ben, okay, so if you could look toward just the middle of the first page, do you see the text message saying, so meet at your house at 3? Do you see that? Whitney, yes, I see that. Ben, and you're referring to the house on Orange, right? Whitney, uh-huh. Ben, now turning to the next page, do you see the next message from Amber at 3:08 p.m. where she writes, Johnny is still over and we're fighting, so please don't come in yet, unquote. Do you see that? Those are actually two different text messages I think we're looking at. Do you see that? Whitney, I do see those messages. Ben, do you know what Amber meant by, quote, Johnny is still, strike that. Do you know what Amber meant by, quote, Johnny is still over, unquote? Whitney, you would have to ask Amber for certain, but I'd have to take that as meant he's still at Orange. Ben, and you returned to Orange later that day, correct? Whitney, yes. Ben, and Amber was there when you arrived back at Orange? Whitney, they were both there, yes. Ben, when you came back, did you observe any injuries to Amber? Whitney, at the time, I didn't know what they were. Her face was swollen, as was her lip, but I wasn't sure what it was. I wasn't sure. Like I said, it was early on at this point. I wasn't aware of the violence that had been happening. So at that time, I think I just attributed it to her being upset and crying. Ben, when you say her face was swollen, could you please describe us briefly what you saw? Yes, please, Whitney. Please do go on. Whitney, I don't know how else to describe it. She just looked like her face was swollen. I don't know how to say it more clearly. I apologize. Ben, no. I'm just trying to get at, was it her entire face, or was it part of her face that was swollen? Whitney, no. Her face was just kind of puffy. And like I said, there appeared to be some sort of, if memory serves, some sort of cut on her lip, but I wasn't sure what it was attributed to. Ben, yeah, I was going to ask that next. So there was a general puffiness on her face. What specifically do you recall observing about her lip? Whitney, again, it just appeared like, right, it was visible that there was like something, I don't know, an injury. I didn't attribute it as an injury at some point, but her lip looked weird to me. Her bottom lip looked weird. Ben, what was Mr. Depp doing when you arrived? Whitney, he was sitting in the breakfast nook of Orange. It was like a walk-in turn. There's a dining room. There's a little separate breakfast nook where a big glass table. He was sitting at it. There was basically an empty bottle of booze in front of him. There was whitey stuff, cigarette butts everywhere. He was smoking. He had glasses on it. It was just sitting at the breakfast nook. Ben, now directing your attention to the third page of Exhibit 4, do you see the text message from Amber at 4:21 p.m. that says, quote, "How is it? Just tell him I love him, please," unquote. Whitney, okay, 3:22, yes. Ben, and the him that your sister is referring to there is Johnny Depp, correct? Whitney, yes. Ben, so at this point, you are with Mr. Depp, correct? Whitney, correct. Ben, and what were you and Mr. Depp doing together? Whitney, so I was called over there to talk to him and hopefully help him get him out of the house. So I was talking to him, just trying to understand what he was upset about, why he didn't want to leave. But again, he was just drinking and, rambling. It was really hard to get out of him what he was upset about. He was talking about things that didn't really make sense or were hard for me to connect. He was just drinking and smoking and rambling. Ben, now directing your attention to the fourth page, do you see where you write to Amber at 7:18, quote, "Shut up, don't thank me for anything. I just wish you could feel my face," unquote. Whitney, yes. I just wish I could feel my face. So she sat there doing whitey stuff. Ben, what do you mean when you said, "I just wish I could feel my face"? Whitney, I don't know. Whitney, we all fucking know what you meant. Stop it. Stop it. Ben, and you just had been doing whitey stuff with Mr. Depp, right? Isn't that why you said, "I wish I could feel my face"? Whitney, that would make sense. That would make sense. I might have done whitey stuff with him. I can't remember for sure. Ben, and if you look a little further down the page, Amber appears to laugh in response to your saying, "I just wish I could feel my face." Do you see that? Whitney, yes, she did. Ha ha. Ben, yeah, I mean specifically, she sent you a message at 7:19 p.m. where she says, "Ha ha ha," right? Whitney, she was either laughing at that or the fact that I was telling her to shut up. I don't know. Ben, your next message to Amber at 7:33 p.m. Do you see that? Whitney said, "Got Kyle to take me home." Ben, who's Kyle? Amber. God, I see A and I think Amber. Whitney, I don't know. I imagine maybe one of his security guards. Ben, okay. And from where did Kyle take you? And where did Kyle take you home? Whitney, so at some point at Orange, I was able to talk to Johnny and get him off the ledge and get him to the car. We drove to 80. We dropped him off at 80 so he could resume shooting. I left Amber with Christy, his sister, and so if memory serves, a gentleman took me from 80 to my house downtown. Ben, what was that? Did he take you back to Orange? Whitney, so no, and I should go back to and clarify. So when Amber and I initially moved into Orange together, when my partner and I at the time had been separated, but in the period of me living there, my partner and I had reconciled, so I moved back in with him downtown and still had her place in Orange. Ben, and who was your partner at the time? Whitney, his name was Sean. Ben, and what was his last name? Whitney, Sean Kaczynski. Ben, would you please spell it for us? So she spells it. Ben, did you and Mr. Kaczynski ever have any violent altercations? Whitney, no. Ben, so he never hit you? Whitney, no. Ben, no, you never hit him. Whitney, no. Ben, did you ever have a physical fight with Amber Heard while Mr. Kaczynski and Mr. Depp were waiting outside? Whitney, outside? No. Ben, okay, so go back after Kyle and Kyle took you home. Was that the last time you saw Mr. Depp that day? Whitney, when we dropped him off at 80, yes, that would have been the last time I saw him that day. Ben, and to be very clear, on March 22nd, 2013, did you see Mr. Depp physically assault your sister Amber Heard in any way? Whitney, I did not see that instance. No. Ben, so you didn't see him hit her, push her, grab her, or pull her hair, correct? Whitney, no, not on that date, no. Ben, how did you get to the Keith Richards set? Whitney, we all left Orange together. From Orange to 80, we would have driven by one of his security guards. Ben, and when you said you all, who was the group who was driven to the Keith Richards set by one of his security guards? Whitney, Amber, Johnny and I. Ben, did Amber say anything you can recall on the way to the set? Whitney, no, she was very quiet. Ben, okay, let's move to Exhibit 5. It's a photograph. Miss Henriquez, have you ever seen this picture before? Whitney, yes, it looks familiar. Ben, what is it, for the record? Whitney, it's the table that was in the breakfast nook of Orange. Appears to be whitey stuff, a pill box that says property of JD, a glass of something, a rolled cigarette. I'm sorry. There is a way to, turn it. Oh, I don't have control. There's a pen, paper, somebody's phone, whatever. It looks like a go-to tumbler that has Johnny's studio or production company logo, and a CD and a bag. Ben, were you physically present when this photograph was taken? Whitney, I was not. I think that was one of the things that was displayed during the UK, that I was not there when this photograph was taken. Ben, do you know when the picture was taken? Whitney, I do not recall a specific time and date. Ben, do you know who took the picture? Whitney, it would have to have been Johnny or whoever else was there. Ben, when you say it had to have been Johnny. Whitney, if Johnny was there, it was Johnny or Amber or whoever was in the house that day. Ben, and you, I believe, please correct me if I'm wrong, you said there's whitey stuff in this picture, true? Whitney, yes. Ben, and a tampon applicator, right? Whitney, yes. Ben, is that your tampon applicator? Whitney, that's not mine. That might have been one that I gave to him, as I testified before. It was a trick that I showed him. So at any point, he had his own in his own pocket that I might have given to him. Ben, did you use any whitey stuff that's depicted here in Exhibit 5? Whitney, I can't answer that with certainty because I don't know when this was. I can't recall when this was taken or what time or date it was taken. But I know, again, in the UK, Mr. Wass confirmed via timestamp or whatever that it was actually taken when I wasn't there at the time. Whether I showed up later, I don't know. Ben, whose phone? Whose phone is in the background of this picture? Whitney, I don't know. Ben, and I think you said there appears to be a cigarette in this picture as well, correct? Whitney, correct. It looks like one of his rolled cigarettes, and then there's tobacco next to it. Ben, so when you say his, it's your understanding it's Mr. Depp's. Whitney, yes. He always has a tobacco rolled cigarette on him. Ben, okay. And I'm going to go back to your witness statement. That is, do you recall testifying that when you arrived at Orange, at the Orange home to talk to Mr. Depp, that he had told you he was upset about a painting about Amber's ex, Tessia Van Ree? Whitney, not initially. That was one of the reasons that came out after I'd been speaking to him. But he was also upset about another friend of Amber's. Sorry, I'm spacing on the names. Marie, I guess Amber, they had been photographed together at some point, and he was upset about that as well. Ben, and specifically, do you recall testifying that Amber told you that Mr. Depp had tried to burn the painting, but when that failed, he scratched out Van Ree's signature to read, quote, Tessia Van P, unquote, right? Whitney, that was again one of the things that my memory had mixed up the two, and one of the things that was cleared up in the UK trial. Ben, so I'm sorry, I interrupted you. Please continue. Whitney, they were two different paintings. Ben, so when you testified at the UK trial, you testified that Mr. Depp only tried to burn the painting on this occasion, correct? Whitney, again, I testified that one painting had attempted to be burned, and another painting, separate entirely, had been, he wrote P on it as opposed to Van Ree. Ben, okay, so they're going on to exhibit number 6 now. Ben, and I'll represent to you that these are text messages between you and Mr. Depp. Ben, yes. Well, they're often just producing. Okay. Question. Do you recognize this exhibit 6 as a series of text messages between you and Mr. Depp on February 11th, 2014? Whitney, yeah. Right now, I only see one message or 2 messages. Ben, okay, there's 3 pages, so why don't you look at them? I think there's one message on each page or one set of messages on each page. Whitney, can I get control? Okay, Ben, and if you wouldn't mind scrolling back to the beginning because I'm going to ask you about these in order. Okay, perfect. So Mr. Depp's messages are the ones in the darker bubbles, correct? Whitney, yes. Ben, and yours are the one in the light bubbles, correct? Whitney, correct. Ben, what is this picture? What was sent on February 11th, 2014? Whitney, that's a photo of the Van P painting. Ben, yes. And this is the picture that Mr. Depp sent to you, true? Whitney, well, it looks like I took the photo and sent it to him. Ben, but this is the picture on which Mr. Depp wrote Tessie Van P, correct? Whitney, correct. Ben, and you respond to the next page, the second page of the exhibit. Well done, my friend, well done, right? Whitney, yes. Ben, and you follow up on February 24th, 2014, which is Depp, and say, quote, the Van P painting earned you 20 points in my books, Condado, unquote, right? Whitney, correct. Ben, and that was you complimenting your brother-in-law, true? Whitney, yeah. Ben, fair to say that you were amused that Mr. Depp wrote Tessie Van P on that painting. Elaine, objection to the form of the question? Okay, correct. Ben, and on February 25th, 2014, you wrote to Mr. Depp, quote, she's the worst. Did sis notice the Van P yet? End quote. You wrote that, right? Whitney, correct. Ben, and you're referring jokingly to she's the worst. You're talking about Miss Van Ree, true? Whitney, yes. Question, why did you say that Miss Van Ree is the worst? Whitney, I don't care for Miss Van Ree. Ben, and you referenced to sis. That's Amber, right? Whitney, yes. Ben, why don't you care for Miss Van Ree? Whitney, that is, how do I answer this? I just don't, she's not a person that I ever really got along with. I wasn't, their relationship, hers and Amber's relationship, I found her to be manipulative, selfish. She was not a person that I got along with or cared for. Ben, did your sister break up with Tessie Van Ree, or did Tessie Van Ree break up with her? Whitney, you'd have to ask either one of them. I wouldn't be able to recall who it was that called it off or why. Ben, you never talked to your sister about it? Whitney, I imagine I did. I just can't recall who broke up with whom. Ben, I mean, weren't they married? Whitney, I believe they were domestic partners. Ben, so you don't have an idea of why they broke up as domestic partners? Whitney, again, you would have to ask either one of them for specifics or clarification, but my understanding is that it was pretty natural progression of separation, if you will. It seemed to be, at least from what I can recall, a relationship that kind of outgrew itself. They did maintain a friendship for some time after that. I believe they're still friendly, but again, I'm not sure as to the specifics. I can't recall if there was a specific reason or why it just, again, from my memory, it was more of a natural progression of our separation. Ben, okay. Well, let's get back to the last page of Exhibit 6. After you say, she's the worst, did sis notice the Van P yet? Question. And Johnny responds, oh yes, she, triple exclamation points, she laughed her ass off. So Mr. Depp is saying that Amber thought this was funny too, correct? Whitney, correct. Because again, as I stated before earlier today, as well as in the UK, this was a different painting altogether. This was the last that we've dubbed the painting incident. Ben, okay. Let's move now to text Exhibit 7, if the technician would please. And this is a picture of a painting the picture that you sent to Mr. Depp, correct? Whitney, yes. Ben, and this is another Tessie Van Ree painting, isn't it? Whitney, correct. That's the one that was hanging in the bedroom. Ben, this is the one that Mr. Depp allegedly tried to burn in March of 2013. Whitney, yes. Ben, I can see why. Now you're right here, quote, good job, Hammer, exclamation point. This is the perfect place for that awful cherries flamingos, exclamation point, unquote. Do you see that? Whitney, yeah. Ben, Hammer is Mr. Depp, true? Whitney, yes. Ben, why are you telling him good job? Whitney, because I don't like her or that painting. Ben, when you write, the only better place for it to be in the incinerator, but we'll have to settle this for now, I suppose, unquote. Do you see that? Whitney, yes. Ben, and you were referring to the picture that you sent, correct? The Van Ree painting? Whitney, yes. Ben, okay, now I'm going to turn, Miss Henriquez, to a more serious subject, and that is the alleged incident that occurred in Los Angeles in March 2015 at the ECB. You have previously testified that Miss Heard came into your penthouse, quote, crying and screaming, unquote. Is that correct? Whitney, March 2015, are we referring to the staircase incident? Is that the same date? Ben, yes. This is what you all refer to as the stairs or staircase incident in March of 2015 at ECB. That you testified about your first witness statement in paragraph 58. Whitney, so the original question was, on that occasion, do I remember Amber coming into my apartment upstairs? Ben, well, actually, the words you said, do you remember her coming in, quote, crying and screaming, end quote? Whitney, you're asking me all of those words I used? Ben, yes. Whitney, if they're in my witness statement, yes. Ben, yeah. And if you want to look back on it, it's fine. I'm trying to be quick. It's exhibit 3, paragraph 58. And you start talking about Los Angeles, March 2015 stairs incident, paragraph 57, and then you go onward. So I'm not trying to trick you. I'm just trying to get your testimony. Ben, so you previously testified at paragraph 58 that Miss Heard came into your penthouse crying and screaming. Is that correct? Whitney, yes. Ben, and in fact, Miss Heard had sparked that argument with Mr. Depp because she had discovered that Johnny had been allegedly cheating on her, true? Whitney, I have no way of knowing who, quote, unquote, started it or not. I don't know who sparked it. I do know that it absolutely had something to do with the fact that she had found out that Johnny was cheating on her. Ben, and you testified to the effect in paragraph 58, correct? Whitney, yes. Ben, and you also testified that Miss Heard woke you up and got you out of bed, true? Whitney, yes. Ben, and then you went into penthouse 5 of the ECB, correct? Whitney, correct, to go to speak to Johnny. Ben, right, and then you referenced that in paragraph 59. Where was Miss Heard when you went into the penthouse 5 to speak with Johnny? Whitney, initially she was in my apartment in penthouse 4. I told her to stay there and wait for me while I went to go speak to him. So I initially made my way to penthouse 5 into the kitchen where everyone was at the time. She was still in penthouse 4, but then she at some point left penthouse 4 and came down to the mezzanine level of penthouse 5. Ben, and where was Mr. Depp when you walked into penthouse 5? Whitney, initially in the kitchen with his I'm sorry? Ben, no, please continue. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Whitney, no, he was at the kitchen island with one of his security, Travis, and his nurse, Debbie. His sobriety nurse, that's what she was going to say. Ben, and that's, when you say Debbie, that was Debbie Lloyd, correct? Whitney, yes, that's her last name. Ben, and when you say kitchen, the kitchen was located downstairs, just in the layout, true? Whitney, yeah. All of the penthouses had a kitchen and a living space on the first floor, and then a visible mezzanine level from the space that was much shorter, and then a third level, which is where the bedrooms were. Ben, and what was Miss Lloyd doing when you came in? Whitney, she was standing next to Johnny. Ben, what, if anything, did she say when she saw you coming in and she was standing next to Johnny? Whitney, I don't recall her saying much of anything. As I said before, I was just there to talk to Johnny, and I don't recall her saying much of anything at all. Ben, would you say that Travis was there? Do you remember Travis's last name? Whitney, names are failing me today. I apologize. Ben, that's not a problem. So there was Debbie Lloyd and there was Travis, there was Johnny. Was there anybody else? Whitney, no. Whitney said no. Question, did anyone else say anything at the time? Whitney, no. From what I can recall, they were both relatively quiet when I was talking to Johnny. I don't recall them saying anything. Ben, and you testified that Mr. Depp allegedly threw a can of Red Bull at you and Miss Heard, correct? Whitney, at some point, Amber, as I mentioned before, Amber had come down from penthouse 4 from my bedroom. She had crossed through the adjoining door and came down the mezzanine level. And as I said, she was upset. She was saying, stop. So I had gone to the mezzanine level and Debbie came with me and we were trying to console Amber and trying to calm her down. She was screaming. He was screaming. And it was at that point that Johnny had hurled a Red Bull can. I don't know if he was aiming for anybody specifically, but it did. It actually hit Debbie when we were standing on the mezzanine level. I don't know who he was aiming it for. Ben, where was Mr. Depp precisely at the best you can remember when he allegedly threw the can of Red Bull? Whitney, in the kitchen around the island with, Travis, who would have been near him. Ben, with which hand, left or right, did Mr. Depp throw the can of Red Bull? Whitney, I can't recall. I don't recall. Sorry. Ben, where was Miss Lloyd when the time he threw the Red Bull? Whitney, she was up on the mezzanine with Amber and I. Ben, where did the can of Red Bull hit Miss Lloyd? Whitney, if memory serves, it kind of hit her in the back. I think she had her back towards the kitchen area. Ben, so when it hit her in the back, where were you and Amber physically in relation to Miss Lloyd? Whitney, I was on the top of the stairs with Amber. She was closer. She was further into the mezzanine area. She also had a desk there, so I believe she was closer to the desk. And at some point, Debbie moved from the side that was on. I think after the Red Bull can hit her, she moved to the other side of the stairs so that it was kind of hard to explain. The stairs that went up like this, it flattened out into a mezzanine level, and then there was another set of stairs that led up to the third floor. She had moved from her back overseeing the kitchen to the other side of the staircase. Whatever, Whitney. Ben, at the time the Red Bull can hit Miss Lloyd in the back, how many feet away from Miss Lloyd were you? Whitney, I couldn't say. We're all very close. It was a very small space at the top of the stairs, so we would have been at arm's length of one another. Ben, so your testimony is that you, Amber, and Miss Lloyd were all within arm's length of each other when Mrs. Lloyd was hit with a can of Red Bull. Where in the back was Miss Lloyd hit? Whitney, again, I hesitate to even say it struck her in the back. I don't recall, but it did hit her, and I want to say it hit somewhere behind her. I didn't quite see where it hit her because of the angle. She was standing next to me. She was facing me, so her back was away from me, so I didn't see where it hit her, but I did see it strike her, and I saw her kind of flinch after being hit by it. What? So I didn't see where it hit her, but I did see it strike her. That makes no sense. Ben, so was my next question, how did Miss Lloyd react when the can of Red Bull hit her? Whitney, she really didn't seem too fazed. She just moved on to the other side. Ben, she didn't say anything? Whitney, no. And as I said, she was up there. We were just trying to calm the situation down. She was actually focused on Amber at that point, which is why I don't think she really reacted to the Red Bull can hitting her. Ben, was she injured, if you know? Whitney, I don't know if she sustained any injuries after that. Ben, did she say ouch or anything to indicate that she had been struck with a Red Bull can? Whitney, as I said, she flinched. She kind of did one of these, like, ooh, like it was clear that something impacted her. And I saw the Red Bull and the can fall next to her. Ben, was the can of Red Bull open at the time that it was allegedly hit Miss Lloyd? Great question. Do you know how full the can of Red Bull was when Mr. Depp allegedly threw it at and hit Miss Lloyd? Whitney, I don't know. Ben, so to please correct me for mischaracterizing your testimony, but you were then trying to de-escalate the situation. Is that true? Whitney, I think that's correct. No, I'm sorry. Ben, is that what you were doing? You were trying to de-escalate the situation? Whitney, yes. Ben, and did Miss Heard calm down? Were your efforts successful? Whitney, not for a while. It wasn't until everyone had been separated, and it wasn't until much later. It was a very intense ordeal. Ben, okay, let's try to keep, step by step in chronological order. You've previously testified that while your back was to the stairs facing Miss Heard, Mr. Depp was pulling you backwards. Am I correct? Whitney, he was very desperately trying to get to Amber. So yes, I was being tugged back. Ben, and specifically, as you can recall, how was Mr. Depp pulling you backwards? Whitney, with his hands? Hands. Do you hear that? Hands. Not possible. I don't. I was blocking him and Amber. My back was to him, and so I just felt getting pulled back. I wasn't looking to see how I was being pulled back. Ben, could you tell whether Mr. Depp was using one hand or the other or both? Whitney, I wasn't paying attention. I can't recall. Ben, Whitney, I just felt it. I don't know how else to describe it. I just felt being pulled back. I wasn't looking to see which hand was doing it. Ben, and you next testified that Mr. Depp, quote, reached out to shove you out of the way to lunge at Miss Heard, reaching out to try and hit Miss Heard, and instead struck you, hitting you in the arm, unquote. Is that right? Whitney, yes. And as I mentioned before, he was desperately trying to get to Amber. And again, I don't think he was intentionally coming for me or trying to strike me, but because I was right in the middle of both of them, yes, I got struck. Ben, and your back was to Mr. Depp, right? I mean, that's what you're just describing, true? Whitney, correct. Ben, in what direction did Mr. Depp shove you? Whitney, he was just pulling. He was pulling at me, and I think when he lunged forward, he kind of lunged forward to get to Amber because Amber was further in, so I would have gone forward. Ben, so he was pulling you back, and then it's your testimony that he managed to shove you forward? Whitney, he was. Yes, because as I described, he was trying to move up. He was trying to move closer to Amber. Ben, when did Mr. Depp hit you in the arm? Whitney, I don't understand. He just moved his arm and it struck me. I don't know what else you mean by how did he hit me? Ben, okay, and you don't know with which arm, right or left, he struck you? Whitney, I can't recall. Ben, do you recall what part of his arm hit you? Whitney, no. It was mostly something I just felt. I didn't see it. I just felt it mostly. Ben, okay. So, and where did that part of his arm impact you? Where in your body did it impact you? Whitney, like the back of me, like the back of my arm maybe? Like around there? Ben, you've previously testified that Miss Heard, your sister Amber, suddenly, quote, lurched forward and hit Mr. Depp, unquote, correct? Whitney, yes, after he struck me. Ben, when he struck you, were you injured? Whitney, I didn't sustain any serious injury, no. Ben, did you sustain any injury? Whit, not that I can recall. Like I said, it wasn't a relatively hard hit. It was, again, I think he was unsteady. It didn't particularly hit me hard. Ben, and you don't even know whether he hit you with one hand or if it was just impact you with part of his arm, true? Whitney, it was a hit, whether or not it was intended for me or what, but it was definitely more than just a punch, a push, or a nudge. Ben, but you don't know whether it was with a hand or not, or another part of his arm, correct? Whitney, correct. Ben, and you didn't seek medical treatment after the alleged incident, true? Whitney, I did not. Ben, okay, so now let's go back. Okay, Amber lurched forward and hit Mr. Depp. Did your sister punch Mr. Depp? Whitney, no, it was vaguely, or at least again, I didn't see the impact that Johnny had done to me, but it's what I imagined the same kind of impact was. It was more of a movement. It was more just a motion, just kind of, it was a reaction. I don't think I didn't see her actually impact a certain part of him because, again, I was flinching but she was very similar movement, and at least what it felt like to what Johnny did to me. What the actual fuck was that? Ben, what hand did Miss Heard use to hit Mr. Depp? Whitney, I can't recall what hand it was. Ben, where did Miss Heard hit Mr. Depp? Whitney, as I just said, I didn't see where she impacted him. Ben, how did Mr. Depp react by being hit by Miss Heard? Whitney, he then grabbed her with one hand and grabbed her by the hair and then started striking her with the other hand in the head. By that point, I had been pushed out of the way and Travis was able to intervene. But that's the next thing that I remember was him grabbing her by the hair and holding it as he was striking her with the other hand. Interesting. Ben, okay, now I appreciate that, but we're going to try and go back just a little bit and unpack that. You testified that you didn't exactly exactly how Miss Heard hit Mr. Depp, but it didn't seem especially hard, right? Whitney, like I said, yes, I didn't see specifically where it was, but given where she was, her angle, her distance from him, I can't imagine that it would have been able to land something. I don't know. She might have. Ben, you didn't actually see how Miss Heard hit Mr. Depp. How did you know that it wasn't especially hard? Whitney, it might, to be clear, it might have been. I just didn't see it. I just didn't see it. It was especially hard or not. I can only imagine, again, given where she was on the stairs, her distance from him, I don't know how she would have been able to hit him especially hard. Ben, now getting back to Mr. Depp's reaction, I think you previously testified that Mr. Depp grabbed Miss Heard by the hair with one hand and that he punched her, quote, really hard in the head with the other hand multiple times, unquote. Is that correct? Whitney, yes. Ben, with what hand did Mr. Depp grab Miss Heard by the hair? Whitney, I couldn't recall if it was right or left. It was the hand that wasn't casted. He was striking her with the hand that wasn't in the cast. I can't recall if that was right or left. Ben, and with what hand did he punch Miss Heard in the head? Whitney, again, I can't recall if it was right or left. It was the hand that was in the cast on it. Ben, okay, so with one hand with a cast on it, he was either grabbing her by the hair or hitting her in the head. And with the other hand, so your testimony is you don't know whether his casted hand hit her in the head or grabbed her by the hair, but it did one of those two things, correct? Ha. Whitney, no, to be clear, no, that's not what I was saying. The hand that was not casted was the one grabbing her by the hair and holding it. The casted hand was the one that was making impact. Oh, interesting. But I don't know. I can't recall if it was the right hand that was casted. I just remember the cast hitting her hand. Ben, and you. And so do you recall that in March 2015 that it was Mr. Depp's right hand that still had a cast on it because of the injury he sustained in Australia, true? Whitney, if you're telling me that it was the right hand, then sure. I'm just saying from my honest memory, I couldn't tell you if it was the right hand or the left hand in the cast. I just remember the cast making impact with her head. Oh dear. Ben, if you're aware that Mr. Depp had severed the top of his finger in Australia, true? Whitney, yes. Ben, and had to have surgery on that finger and had a pin in that finger, true? Whitney, yes. Ben, so does your testimony sitting here today that Mr. Depp was hitting Miss Heard with a hand with a severely injured finger with a pin in it? Whitney, you mean the cast? The hard casted hand? The injured finger that he wrote on the walls with? Yes, that is the same hand. Ben, yeah, I wasn't asking about the finger on the hand. That was a nice addition. I just want to get this kind of clear. So it's your testimony that Mr. Depp was hitting Miss Heard with a hand, severely injured finger, and a pin in it. That's your testimony. Whitney, it is. Oh, Whitney. It is my testimony that despite being very injured, he still used it to punch my sister in the head repeatedly. Ben, and you've previously testified that you immediately took Miss Heard back to your penthouse to make sure she was okay, correct? Whitney, correct. Then at that point, she goes on, at that point, I immediately separated her from the situation, put her in mine, and locked the door behind me to make sure she was safe. Ben, what injuries did Miss Heard have at that time? Whitney, injuries to her face and her head from being repeatedly slammed with a hard cast, and also from where her hair had been pulled out from grabbing it. Ben, okay. What did her face look like? What did you observe about her face that made you think she had sustained any injuries? Whitney, apart from seeing the hard cast impact her face and head, she was also red, swollen. It appeared that she had actually been impacted. You could see it. It was visible. Ben, so you saw redness, swelling. Did you see any bruises or bleeding? Whitney, bruising? No. Bruising doesn't happen immediately, but there was swelling, there was redness, possibly scuffs like scratches from the actual cast. Oh, interesting. Ben, well, there were, you said possibly. Did you see a scratch mark or did you not see them? Whitney, as I recall specifically seeing redness and swelling, I didn't closely examine her, but if memory serves, I remember that the injury to her was visible. It was more visible in the coming days, in the days after. But at the time, it was just very red, irritated, and swollen. Yet no fucking pictures. Isn't that interesting? They took pictures of the rampage of the closet being destroyed, but not Amber's face. Isn't that interesting? Ben, what? Putting aside her face, you have fully described everything that you remember seeing about her, the injuries to her face at that time? Whitney, that night specifically? Ben, right, at that time, and then I'm going to ask you about the rest of her head. But I just want to get all your testimony, all your recollection about what you saw on her face. Have you described for us everything that you recall seeing at that time, not later? Whitney, to the best of my recollection, yes. Ben, were there any, other than her face and head, did you witness any injuries to her body that night, the rest of her body? Whitney, not that I can recall. Ben, did you say something about, well, you said something about injuries to her head, not including? She interrupted him, so he goes on. Would you please describe for us what, if any, injuries you observed on her head as opposed to her face? Whitney, so I didn't closely examine her, but where her hair had been pulled and held, it was just raised. It was just disheveled. I didn't examine it for injuries. Ben, okay. Whitney, but it was her injuries were very consistent with what I just witnessed. Ben, did Nurse Lloyd, make any attempt to examine Miss Heard after witnessing what had happened with Mr. Depp? Whitney, no, she did not. Her and Travis left with Johnny. Ben, okay. If you could please show the witness number 8. So they're pulling up number 8. And they take a break. So they took a break. Okay, they come back from break and Ben asked, you have before you Exhibit 8. These are text messages that you have produced between yourself and Nurse Aaron Broom, correct? Whitney, may I please have control? She said yes. Ben, and who was reflected in the green box to the right of the contact name Aaron Nurse? Whitney, Aaron Broom, Amber's nurse at the time. Ben, and is Aaron Broom your nurse as well? Whitney, no. No. Ben, why did you have Aaron Broom's phone number? Whitney, in case I needed it to get a hold of her for any reason. She traveled with Amber, and Amber almost never had her phone with her or on her. I call bullshit, so anyone that was around Amber, I just made it a point to get their contact information so I could stay in contact. Amber never left anywhere without that goddamn phone. She always had it. Whitney, come on. Ben. And in the date of these messages on the first page, which is March 23rd, 2015, correct? Whitney, correct. Ben, and she's reaching out to check on Amber, right? Whitney, yes. Ben, and specifically she says, thank goodness she must be exhausted. Do you want me to come to the loft or is she safe and sound asleep? And you respond, safe? No, she's not. She keeps wanting to delete herself. I took her meds and hid them, unquote. Did I read that correctly? Whitney, I'm scrolling down to the last bit of the messages because it cut off. Safe? No, she's not. She kept, yes, I said, I see that. Ben, what meds were you trying to hide from Miss Heard? Whitney, part of both Aaron and Debbie's function in their life is they carried around medicine and administered medication for them. They had like daily pill packs, if you will, and they were meant to take pills at certain times, whatever, all prescription medication. So the meds that I'm referring to would have been her little daily allotment that was prescribed by Dr. Kipper. Ben, but you were trying to hide those from Amber. Whitney, in all my life and my relationship with Amber, I've never known her to threaten or talk about deleting herself or anything even remotely resembling that. And I remember after this ordeal, and she was so upset, I had never heard her say that before, and I was scared. It was my own panic and not knowing what to do with the situation because, again, I had never heard her say those things before. I'd never known her to have any version of these thoughts, so I was just scared. I hid everything that I thought could hurt her. Ben, all I asked you was, what meds were you trying to hide from your sister? Whitney, I believe you asked me why I hid them. Ben, no, I didn't. That's not what I asked. I asked you, what meds were you trying to hide from Miss Heard? Whitney, I apologize. The meds I'm referring to in this message would have been her daily allotment of prescriptions. Ben, what was Miss Heard saying to you to make you think that she was going to delete herself? Whitney, as I just said, and I just said here, she was really upset and saying she wanted to delete herself. And again, because I had never heard her say anything like that before, and it scared me. Ben, was there anyone else with you at that time? Whitney, I was just explaining why she said, when she said that, and why I took her meds and I hid them because I was scared. I never heard her say that, and I was just scared that she was going to do something with them. No, but to answer your question, then no, nobody else was there on the loft with me. Ben, was March 13th to March 23rd, 2000, the first time you ever heard Miss Heard speaking of harming herself? Oh, sorry, he meant, 2015. Whitney, as I just said, yes, this is the first time I've ever heard her say anything like that or since. Ben, have you ever heard Miss Heard tell you in words or substance that she wanted to delete herself after the date of these text messages on March 23rd, 2015? Whitney, no. Ben, was Amber under the influence of any drugs or alcohol on March 23rd, 2015, as far as I know? Whitney, to my knowledge, no. I didn't see her consume anything or take anything. Ben, were you with her all day on March 23rd? Whitney, no, I was not. Whitney, as I mentioned, I was woken up. I was asleep. I wasn't with them. Ben, was anyone else at the ECB on March 23rd? Whitney, apart from Debbie Lloyd Travis, who I mentioned before, Rocky Pennington and Josh Drew were still living in the other loft. Isaac was living in the other loft, but nobody was in either 3, 4, or 5. Ben, okay, if you look at the next page on 107, Whitney Heard 107, you tell Aaron Broom that you were, quote, trying to fix some of the things he broke. Do you see that? Whitney, yes. Ben, and the he is Johnny Depp. Is that correct? Whitney, yes. Ben, did you see Johnny Depp on March 23rd, 2015? Whitney, the day before was the stair, if memory serves, the staircase incident. I don't know when this message is. Let's see, March 23rd. That would have been, I think, the next day, if I'm not mistaken. Ben, yes, it's the next day. That day, March 23rd. Whitney, I didn't see him that day. Whitney, when the ordeal took place, I don't know if I was technically after midnight or whatever, but after the ordeal, after I heard him smashing everything in the other apartment, I did not see him after that. Ben, did you see Mr. Depp break anything on March 23rd, 2015? Whitney, after I got to Amber into my apartment, I heard him smashing things. I heard him and I heard his voice. I heard him. I heard things crashing and he's screaming obscenities saying, I hate you, fuck you, you effing C word, this, that, and the other. I heard him crashing everything in the adjoining lot. Would you be able, my question, and it's an honest question, would you be able to hear anything? Because I've lived in a condo before, and because it was a very old building, you couldn't hear anything, nothing. It was soundproof as soundproof can be. I don't know. And that's a very, very old building where they built things correctly. I don't know if you would have been able to hear anything. Anyway, that's just my thoughts. Question, did you see him break anything? Whitney, no. As I said before, I locked the door behind me. I only heard it. Ben, and what was broken if you saw anything? Whitney, a bunch of clothing racks, a couple of pieces of artwork were damaged, holes in the wall, broken dishes in the kitchen, trash, like, cans of Red Bull and what have you. But basically all of the almost, if not all of the clothing racks and shoe racks that were in those rooms were knocked down and destroyed and broke. Ben, did Miss Heard have any visible bruises or marks? Whitney, the following day? Ben, when you saw her on March 23rd. Whitney, again, I can't recall specifically examining her. Why wouldn't you not? If you actually witnessed your sister being hit in the head with a cast, why would you not check? Why would you not check? Because it never happened. Okay. Question, did Aaron Baroom come to the ECB on the evening of March 23rd? Whitney, let me see. I'm just jumping in the shower and then heading over. I don't recall. I mean, her message indicates that she made it out there, but I don't recall if she actually made it to us or not. Ben, what, if anything, did Miss Broom tell you that evening? Whitney, I honestly don't recall the conversation that I had with her about it. Ben, okay, let's move to another subject. Who is Jennifer Howell? Whitney, Jennifer Howell was my boss at the Art of Elysium, as well as she was a friend. Ben, did your sister also form a friendship with Jennifer Howell? Whitney, yes. Ben, and isn't it true that Miss Howell wrote a letter in support of Amber when she was in trouble with the Australian authorities about the dogs? Whitney, from my recollection, yes, she did. Ben, did you and Miss Howell refer to each other as, quote, chosen sisters, end quote? Whitney, yes. Ben, and didn't you move in with Jennifer Howell at some point? Whitney, yes. She was kind enough to take me in. Ben, and isn't it true that you told Miss Howell that you were moving in with her because you were, quote, terrified of your sister, end quote? Whitney, I never said I was terrified of Amber. Ben, you said you were scared of her. Whitney, no, I never said that. Ben, did you ever tell Jennifer Howell that it was Amber who tried to push Johnny down the stairs? Whitney, no, I never said that. Ben, did you ever tell? Whitney, not true. Ben, did you ever tell Jennifer Howell that you tried to stop your sister Amber from striking and hitting Johnny Depp on the stairs? Whitney, I never said that to her. Ben, didn't you tell Jennifer Howell that Amber nearly pushed you down the stairs that night? Whitney, no. Ben, did you tell Jennifer Howell that you were trying to protect Johnny? Whitney, no. Ben, did you tell Jennifer Howell that you were worried that, quote, Amber was going to kill Johnny, unquote? Whitney, no. Ben, did you tell Jennifer Howell that you endured, quote, the kind of abuse your entire life, first from your father, then from Amber, unquote? Whitney, I never said I suffered any violence at the hands of Amber. We did talk about my father, but I never said I was subjected to any violence because of Amber. I never said that. Ben, so Miss Howell's just making all of these things up. Is that your testimony? Whitney, I honestly don't know why she's saying the things she's saying. I can only speak to what I've told her in the past. I can't speculate as to why she's saying what she's saying now. Ben, didn't you tell Miss Howell that your sister Amber was extremely violent? Whitney, I never said that. Ben, let's move on to the infamous 30th birthday party in April of 2016. Oh yes, her 30th birthday. Do you recall attending Amber's birthday party that year? Whitney, yes, I did. Ben, in your witness statement, you write that you left soon after Mr. Depp arrived because you were pregnant and feeling sick. Is that correct? Whitney, is that correct? Ben, is that right? Whitney, that I left because I was pregnant and not feeling well? Ben, yeah. Whitney, that is correct. Ben, and you also testified that you went to Coachella with Amber the next day on April 22nd, 2016, where Amber told you the events from the day before while on the way to Coachella. True? Whitney, yeah, we discussed it. Ben, where did you meet up with Amber that day to go to Coachella? Whit, to the best of my knowledge, I would have met her at ECB. Ben, why did you actually go up to the penthouse that morning? Whitney, I imagined I would have. Oh, interesting. Ben, who was there when you arrived, saw Amber when you went upstairs? Whitney, I can't recall who might have been in penthouse 3 or 5, but as I mentioned before, Rocky was still living there in a separate loft, as was Isaac. But in terms of if they were together or not, I can't really recall. Ben, and Rocky is Rocky Pennington and Isaac is Isaac Bruce, correct? Whitney, that is correct. Ben, and did Amber tell you in words of substance that Mr. Depp had hit her the night before? Wait, she didn't go into detail around that time. I'm just told it was another nasty brawl. Ben, what, if any, bruises, swelling, or marks did you observe, if any, on Amber on April 22nd, 2016? Whit, I don't recall seeing anything. Ben, I'm going to show you a document from your production bearing bait stamp Whitney Heard 49 and will be marked as Exhibit 14. I will anticipate you wanting to have it a little larger. Thank you. She says she's blind. Question. Are these text messages from you to Mr. Depp on April 23rd, 2016? Whitney, yes. Ben, would you still have been at Coachella at this date? Whitney, sorry, do you mind if I just read it real quick? She said she just wanted to make sure. Whitney, yes, that's when we were still at Coachella. Ben, are you telling Mr. Depp that your sister misses him and that she's not ignoring his messages? Whitney, yes, missing you like crazy. Ben, I'm sorry I interrupted you. Would you finish your answer? Whitney, yes, I do see that here, and I said that she's missing you like crazy, was missing you like crazy, and wanted to hear from you. Yeah. Ben, and you specifically say, quote, don't mean to stick my nose where it shouldn't be, end quote, because Amber didn't know that you were texting Johnny, correct? Whitney, I imagine. Ben, and even though your sister told you the day prior that Mr. Depp had hit her, you still wanted to make sure that they communicated, true? Whitney, I can't recall exactly what my motive would have been other than to pacify or nullify after an argument, which was pretty typical in this cycle. You know, it's very possible she knew I sent him the message, but I think I was just trying to de-escalate because I knew that often what would make the problem worse on both sides is that the other one would perceive that the other one hadn't been reaching out enough or was reaching out too much. You know, there was kind of a not clear answer as to what would help. So I think I was trying to get in front of any issues that might have arisen because there was a lack of contact. If that makes any sense. Ben, no. And it's fair to say that at this time, you didn't want the two of them to break up, true? Whitney, I don't know if it's as simple as an answer, yes or no. I know at this point, Amber and I, or at least I think this point, Amber was still in a place where she wanted the relationship to work. I can't say for sure what was going through Johnny's head, obviously, but what I wanted had nothing to do with it. I was just trying to be supportive of my sister in what I thought she wanted. Or was it that your meal ticket was running away? Whitney, was your meal ticket running away? I think it was. Ben, now before Amber and Johnny got engaged in September of 2013, you had known about your sister's allegations that Mr. Depp had hit her, correct? Whitney, prior to their engagement? I don't know. I didn't know for sure. I had suspected here and there. I just knew that the fights were numerous and they were very ugly. The arguments between them were so frequent, but I did not know the full extent of everything that has been going on. No. Ben, well, you testified that your nickname was the marriage counselor because you had intervened in a lot of fights between your sister and Johnny Depp, correct? Whitney, that is correct. It was very often one of them would ask me to reach out on the other or go talk to one another or, the other one, depending on whatever the situation was, because I was close to both of them and I knew both of them very well. Ben, and you also testified in your witness statement, which is Exhibit 3 in paragraph 16, that by mid-2013, you had confronted your sister about signs of physical abuse on her body, true? Whitney, yes, I had asked her about some weird marks that I'd seen on her, or yes, I had asked her about it. So now they're going to number 15. Question. And for the record, these are texts between you and Johnny from your production, Whitney Heard 58 through 60. Okay, we're going to, if you look at the second page, Whit Heard 59, you ask, quote, and where the fuck is that ugly sis of mine? Do you see that? Whit, I'm sorry, I'm still getting down. Question, it's on the next page. Whit, I lost a toe. Yes, there was an ugly sis of mine. Yes, I see. Ben, and you said, and where the fuck is that ugly sis of mine? She's hiding from me again. Do you see that? Whit, yes. Ben, and Mr. Depp then tells you that Amber is at a photo shoot, to which you respond, well, smack her for me when she comes home. Haha, just a little love tap, not too hard. Do you see that? Whit, yes. Ben, and Johnny responds, quote, all right, I guess. And then you respond, okay, maybe a little hard. Did I read that correctly? Whit, yeah. Ben, are you joking? Whitney, yes, you did. Ben, are you joking about Johnny slapping Amber? Whit, yes. Regrettably, there's no given everything I know now, the context of everything I know now. There is no way this is also taken out of context. A very, very bad report and way of talking with one another that had been long established, long before these messages were sent. Ben, well, at the time you sent these messages, you had testified that you allegedly had seen signs of physical abuse on your sister. So why would it be funny to bring up? Why would it be funny to send this to an alleged abuser of your sister? Whit, again, I did not know the extent of what was going on. Like I said, I had suspicions. And again, these messages are taken out of context with a series of earlier ones where we were joking about smacking and hitting or whatever that they were portrayed by him. It's important to point out that, like, I clearly wasn't calling my sister ugly, an ugly sister of mine or whatever. We had just very poor way of communicating with one another that was in bad taste, bad humor, not anything I would repeat again. You also have to look at it in the context of me being, at the time, 25, talking to my sister's relatively new 50-year-old boyfriend who had already been speaking this way to me. It was a rapport that was established long before I knew for sure anything had been going on between the two of them. Then, it was funny because you knew darn well that Johnny wasn't an abuser at all. Isn't that true? Whitney, I disagree. She had the balls to sit there with her full chest and say all this, and Johnny was actually listening in. She had the fucking nuts to do this. Man, oh man. Ben, have you ever seen Johnny attack Amber on any occasion other than the ones you've already told us about today? Whitney, Amber is the only time I've seen him attack Amber. I've definitely seen him be violent with other people, but not Amber. That's the only time I've witnessed it. Ben, when you've seen him be violent with other people? Whitney, well, once he threw a knife at his assistant at dinner. Ben, what assistant was that? Whitney, I beg your pardon? Ben, what assistant was that? Whitney, it was Nathan. Ben, when you say Nathan, you mean Nathan Holmes? Whit, yes. Ben, did he hit Nathan Holmes with a knife? Whitney, I don't believe it actually struck him. No. Ben, okay, so what other violent incidents did you observe? Whitney, against a person specifically, or just Ben? That's what violence usually means. Oh, yes, what violence? What violence against any other person other than missing Nathan Holmes with a knife you have witnessed? Whitney, other than what I saw on the stairs and him hurling a knife at Nathan, I have not seen anything else. Ben, okay, have you ever seen Johnny punch, slap, hit, or throw things at Amber on any occasion other than the ones you've already told us about today? Other than the staircase? No. Ben, have you personally witnessed Johnny physically harm Amber on any occasions other than the ones you've already told us today? Whitney, no. Ben, okay, have you ever worked with your sister at the time of at the same establishment? Whitney, I'm sorry, what establishment? Ben, have you ever worked with your sister at a company, business, or establishment? I know where this is going. Whitney, there was a brief period where I was helping her out, but not, we did our time there didn't overlap, but we did work at the same, it was a bar called The Score, but I don't believe our time overlapped there. We worked there at separate times. Ben, wasn't The Score a strip club? Whitney, it was. Ben, and you didn't work at the door. And you didn't work the door at the strip bar. Whitney, I did. Ben, and your sister was a stripper at the strip bar, correct? Whitney, at some point, yeah, but again, not while I was there. Ben, did you ever see your sister strip? Whitney, no. Ben, was your sister also an escort at the Score? Whitney, absolutely not. Ben, for how long was she? For how long did she strip at the Score? Whitney, I couldn't recall. You'd have to ask her. Ben, who is Peter Berg? Whitney, he's a director, a friend of Amber's. I actually don't know if they're still friendly. He's directed one of her first movie, Friday Night Lights. Ben, when did your sister's affair with Peter Berg begin? Whitney, I don't know if I categorize it as an affair. Ben, when did they? Whitney, I don't know. Ben, when did they have sex? Whitney, I have no idea. Ben, wasn't she underage when she first had sex with Mr. Berg? Whitney, I don't know that to be true. Ben, but you know there did come a time when she had sex with the director of her first movie. Whit, I was made aware that they did start a relationship at some point. I couldn't tell you when it started or when it ended. Ben, it was before the movie came out, correct? Whitney, I don't know. Ben, the movie actually came out when she was only 18, true? Whitney, I don't recall her age when it came out. Ben, and that movie was shot before it, like the year before it came out, correct? Whit, I would imagine so. I couldn't tell you specific dates or years. All right, Ben Chu, let's go to Exhibit 9, please. For the record, these are text messages between you, Mr. Depp, that you produced. Do you recognize these messages? Whitney said, okay. Ben, is the green box Mr. Depp? Whitney, yes. And you're the blue box? Whitney, yes. Question. And does the contact information say Mr. Hop, one of your nicknames for Mr. Depp? Whitney, correct. Ben, what's the date of these text messages? Whit, April 9th, 2015. Ben, and Exhibit 9, you text Mr. Depp, quote, hey there, sweet brother outlaw. Just wanted to know that I love you and I'm here for you if you ever need anything, no matter what, unquote. Did I read that correctly? Whit, yeah. Ben, why did you text Johnny that message? Whitney, I actually don't know. I don't recall what this is in reference to or what it was about. Ben, weren't you? Whitney, but I imagine it was after a spat, just given the way he's speaking about her afterward. Ben, and you weren't showing support for Johnny after another fight. And you weren't showing support for Johnny after another fight with Amber? Whitney, as I routinely did after a fight, showing support for both of them. Ben, and he says, Mr. Depp then says he's all right and says, quote, though I never ever want to lay my eyes on that filthy whore Amber, most embarrassing, Jay. And then this marriage is the dumbest thing I've ever done. She's all over dudes for months. I've never cheated on her. Triple exclamation mark, no matter what she spews, unquote. Did I read that correctly? Whit, yes. Ben, and the last text here you say, quote, I don't know why you guys are fighting right now, but I have to tell you she loves you so much and would never cheat on you either. Trust me when I tell you that, unquote. Did I read that correctly? Whitney, yes. Ben, does that confirm or refresh your memory as to why Miss Heard and Mr. Depp may have been fighting? Whitney, I'm sorry, it doesn't. Ben, isn't this a few weeks after the incident where you alleged in your witness statement that you testified today that Mr. Depp tried to physically assault your sister in front of you on the staircase? Whitney, the dates absolutely would lead me to believe that it would be after that incident. Again, even in that argument, it was established that he had actually cheated on her. You know, he nullified it and justified it, whatever he could. But then, as they always did, they just reconciled somehow just days after. And who knows? Who knows who was in the reference to and who it was about specifically? I don't recall. Ben, but my point is, this is after the violent incident that you described on the staircase, true? Whitney, yes. Ben, but nevertheless, you texted Johnny to try and have him stay with your sister, aren't you? Whitney, it's an oversimplification of what's happening and what happened in the duration of their relationship. I disagree with the oversimplification of it. The entirety of their relationship, the fighting on and off again, the passion is they loved each other so much and they both wanted it to work so much at some point that whether or not it was right, whether or not it made sense to anybody else, it was irrelevant. Those two, they were still trying to make it work for whatever reason. And not a good answer, Whit. Ben, but you sure weren't telling your sister to back off. You weren't telling him to back off your sister, right? Whitney, as I was starting to say, is that despite whether or not I felt okay with it or not, and I did have a separate conversation with her expressing my reluctance, and you know, at the end of the day, I was there to support her in what she wanted at the time. Whether or not that was the right call or not, who's to say? I can't. But at the time, Amber wanted this to work, and she would often tell me, even if I didn't agree with it, even if I didn't think it was okay, help me, Whitney. I need to get him back. I need to make sure this is okay. She was so in love with him that she was willing to put up with so much. She was in love with his wallet, Whitney. Oh. And me, as her sister, I had to be there to support her. And so if she's asking me to send messages like this, I was going to do it. In hindsight, would I do it again? Absolutely not. But I didn't know then what I know now. Again, we're talking, it seemed like it was a lifetime ago. Yeah, because the money was running away from both of you, wasn't it? Mm-hmm. Ben, did Amber in fact ask you to send the messages you sent in Exhibit 9? Whitney, I can't recall if she specifically asked me to send the messages, but in the past, both of them have asked me to send messages to the other one at some point or the other saying, oh, tell him I love him or tell her I love her. But this one, I can't recall if it was her, to be honest or not. Ben, okay. Let's look at Exhibit 10, which is another one of your documents. Whitney Heard 38. This is another series of texts between you and Johnny Depp, correct? Whitney, yes. Ben, and you start the text. Ben, no, I'm sorry. I'm just wondering why it's both my number and my email. But yeah, it's Johnny and I. Ben, okay. And you see the date was April 18th, 2015. Whit, yes. Ben, and this is just a few days after the text we just talked about, Exhibit 9, true? Whit, yes. Ben, and you start the text with, hey, Hammerhead, that's just another friendly nickname that you had for Johnny, right? Whit, correct. Ben, you go on to write, quote, just was thinking about you and hope you're well. Also wanted to say thank you so much for this fucking trip. The bitch is happy fucking camper. The bitch is a happy fucking camper having all of us here, and I just wanted to thank you for everything. Love you, fucker, unquote. Did I read that correctly? Whitney, yes. Ben, what trip are you referring to here? Whit, I don't know actually. Ben, when you say the bitch, who are you referring to? Whit, my sister. Ben, do you recall going on a trip with your sister's birthday in 2015? Whit, I can't recall specifically. I mean, this message clearly indicates that we were on a trip, but I don't recall where it was or what it was for. Ben, and that's around the time of your sister's birthday, correct? Whitney, yes, it is. Ben, sounds like Mr. Depp paid for the trip, true? Whit, I imagine so, which is why I'm thanking him. Ben, and Johnny paid for trips or events for Amber, you and her friends quite often, right? Okay, so then it ends. It ended on page 249, and then I'm assuming that Whitney just said, yes, Johnny paid for absolutely fucking everything in our lives, and that's why we didn't want him to go away. But then they go into a break. So they have this whole back and forth, 30 minutes for lunch, blah, blah, blah. People are giving Elaine shit for, just saying things that she wasn't there for. Anyway, back on the record. Elaine, so I wanted to just respond to a couple of things that Mr. Chu said before we get started. I'm going to quote Sam Moniz from January 19th, 2020 email. For the avoidance of doubt, please be advised that Mr. Depp is entitled to take equal question time at all depositions or third-party witnesses and Oh, for fuck's sakes, Elaine. Okay, so now they're fighting. So after they take the break, now they're just fighting over things. But this is what Elaine said, but the most important thing here is Whitney Henriquez's health, and clearly she is not feeling well, and she's very, very tired, and I do not, under the circumstances, I think the right thing to do is to terminate the deposition at this point. Whitney, can you just acknowledge on the record that what I've represented to counsel about your doctor's visit and you're feeling tired and not feeling well are accurate? Whitney says, absolutely, I agree with everything you just said. And just to further elaborate, I really am due at any moment. And I really have kind of been pushed. And I want to be helpful as I can be, but I'm literally about to give birth at any moment. And I hope you guys understand. Okay, so what happened after that? So they're off the record. Okay, so Elaine, thank you. Okay, and well, for the record, reporters, you will read. Okay, we're off the record. So Camille said, Ben, you're on mute. Hold on. We shouldn't be off the record yet. Ben's on mute. Ben, we're not off the record. We are not off the record. Your witness may be excused, but we are not off the record. Elaine, Whitney, you may leave. We are off the record, court reporter. Ben, we are not. Elaine, we are off the record. Ben, this is absolutely outrageous, even for you, Elaine. This is a new low, and you have no right to unilaterally terminate the deposition, and I will be heard on the record, or you'll be using a different reporting company in the future. Court reporter said, counsel, this is your stenographer, and you have been on the record the entire time. Ben, good. Ben, let me please state this. The one thing and the only thing that I agree with Ms. Bredehoff said, that is Ms. Henriquez's health is of paramount importance. Because of that, and because she is pregnant and about to have a baby, of course we were happy and to excuse her for the day. Elaine left the virtual deposition room. Elaine just left. Oh my God. So Ben, she went on, but the deposition will continue in the near future, when she's feeling better. We don't want her to testify when she's tired and could jeopardize her health or the baby's health. But everything else Ms. Bredehoff said was outrageous, and she knows it. We are entitled to complete the deposition. Ms. Bredehoff knows that. The deposition has gone 3.5 hours. This is her witness. She represents the witness. She represents the defendant. The only person on the planet other than Amber Heard, the only one willing to back the lie, the only one who claims to have seen in the world Johnny Depp ever raise a hand to a woman is the sister, and we're entitled to full deposition of her sister, and we will reconvene this. And if Miss Bredehoff does not agree to bring Miss Henriquez back when she's doing better before the end, and now Elaine comes back in, Ben Chu says, let me finish. Before the end of discovery period, if she doesn't agree to do that right now, we will file an emergency motion and have it heard by Chief Judge Azkarati. So we would ask that this part of the transcript be expedited so that we may properly place it before the court on an emergency basis, because this is an absolute outrage and we don't agree with anything that she said or anything that Miss Henriquez health being we don't agree with anything that she said other than Miss Henriquez health being paramount. So we will see you again, Miss Henriquez. When you feel better, I hope you feel better. Go back and get some rest. Elaine, all right, I'm going to go on the record. I went off, I left the Zoom and had indicated to my client to leave the Zoom because the court reporter had indicated we were off the record. I was not on for any of what Mr. Chu just said. I just came back on right now. So I didn't hear anything that he said. But Whitney, I would like you to leave the meeting. This is not... Whitney's like, yeah, I'm fucking out. Like, I'm out. Elaine, appropriate. I want you to take care of yourself. Good luck, okay? So I guess Whitney left. Go take care of yourself. This is the most important thing. Okay, so then Whitney left. Elaine, okay, I didn't hear anything that he said. I'm happy to have him expedite or whatever, and I will deal with the court when we need to. I'm leaving the meeting now. Let's be clear. Then Elaine left the fucking meeting. So the court reporter said, counsel, your record is still open unless you want me to close it. Ben, no, I think what we need, please, is an expedited transcript of the last 15 minutes of my examination of the witness up until this point. If we could expedite that for production tomorrow, because clearly we're going to have to ask the court for an emergency order that Miss Henriquez come back to complete her deposition. Miss Vasquez may want to say something as well. Camille, well, I want to confirm that whether any deposition exhibits have been uploaded by Miss Bredehoff or her firm. Oh. The technician said, I have not seen any exhibits in my download link. Camille's like, got it. Camille's like, that's all we need to know. Camille, okay, that's what I figured. She didn't have anything. Elaine didn't have anything. Oh my fucking God. Ben Chu, another misrepresentation on the record. Camille, exactly. Ben, by Miss Bredehoff, very unfortunate. Camille, yes, very unfortunate indeed. Okay, I think that's it. Ben, thank you all. And then, they're just looking for clarification. Wow. Okay. So the court reporter just wanted like clarification on like the stenographer, blah, 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 blah. Ben, that didn't sound right to me. I have not heard of someone unilaterally saying we're going off the record, so thank you. Elaine comes back into the room. Elaine, I don't want you to go back off the record. I just came back on. I told you I was leaving, and apparently you kept talking. But somebody incorrectly said we had not uploaded exhibits. Who said that? Can you go back and correct that on the record, please? So the technician says, yes, with the history download link I have, I'm only seeing exhibits from Mr. Chu. I don't know if there's a different link somewhere or... Elaine, we have uploaded exhibits. We absolutely have uploaded exhibits, and we absolutely fully intend to take her deposition for 3.5 hours. Camille, why would you take your own witness deposition, Elaine? I mean, that's absurd. You're an attorney that's practiced how many years? And you know you have no intention of deposing your own witness. Elaine, can we stay on the record until you verify? Lucien, I want to verify that we uploaded those exhibits. Ben, maybe he's lying. Maybe he's lying that all the police officers are lying in this case. Elaine, Lucien, it is really important to us that we get accurately on the record that we uploaded exhibits. Ben, you didn't. Technician, is there a link that you could share with me that I can maybe check? Ben, she's probably sending it right now. Elaine, no, as you hear like clicking in the background. Ben, she's probably sending it right now. Let's get a timestamp on that link. It's 5:13:27 seconds, Ben. Elaine, I really don't appreciate that, Mr. Chu. You're calling us liars and we're not lying. Ben, I don't appreciate you terminating I don't appreciate you terminating a material witness in the middle of a deposition either. Elaine, we absolutely uploaded this morning. Hold on a second. I'm just going to get Ben, maybe you did it in invisible ink. Elaine, you know, Mr. Chu, I don't appreciate you. Your unprofessionalism, it's inexcusable. Ben, you can call me unprofessional when I pull a witness in the middle of a deposition. Elaine, she's 9.5 months pregnant. She's not feeling well. Ben, and I said on the basis that basis alone, we agreed that she would be excused, but not that the deposition has ended, and you have refused to give us a new date for the deposition. Elaine, I wasn't on, exactly, because you fucking ran away, Elaine. That's what happened. You panicked and you ran away. Ben, the basis, Elaine, I wasn't even here. I thought we were off the record. Ben, you give the basis. Elaine, you kept talking, knowing it wasn't on. I think that's the most unprofessional thing it's not the most unprofessional thing I've ever heard of, but it's pretty outrageous. You're still on the record. Ben, we're off the record. Elaine, we are staying on the record until we solve the issue on the upload. Ben, there's no issue. You didn't upload any exhibits because this was all a sham. Elaine, no, it's not a shame at all. And I absolutely represented correctly. And my client represented correctly. And she's not feeling well. You can see visibly she was getting very tired. Ben, I didn't question that. I didn't question your client's representation. I agreed with that. It's yours that I'm questioning. Oh, Elaine, all right, we're staying on the record until we solve this. Lucian, can you check? I just sent a text to my paralegal, but we should be able to. This was definitely uploaded. It was much earlier this morning. I absolutely intended. She uploaded it at 9:41 a.m. Oh, you catch that? I absolutely intended. So the remote technician, and was that using a Planet Depot repository? Elaine, the link came from Jillian. Elaine, and the links, there's a lot of stuff here. Let's see. So the remote technician is emailing Jillian. Technician, do you have the download link somewhere? That might be quicker. I'll try to email her. Elaine, are you talking Greek to me? I'm not the one who ever did the uploading, but I have the email exchange where they gave me the upload link. And then there was an upload at 9:41. Ben, so my question is whether you will agree to bring her back to finish the deposition, yes or no? Elaine, so if we were to bring her back, I would take her deposition because I'm entitled to 3.5 hours. You know, we can certainly talk about it, but right now, I don't know if she's having a baby, okay? I don't know what her circumstances are. I know she's not feeling well, and she's extremely tired. I don't know what her circumstances are, but I'm not going to agree to definitely bring her back. I don't know, are you bringing Jennifer Howell back? Are you bringing Christian Carino back? Ben, I'll take that as a no. Elaine, if I bring her back, I would take her deposition for 3.5 hours, which is what I fully plan to do. Ben, all right, well. Elaine, if you want me to do that, we can explore that. What Whitney's health is and what her circumstances are, and I can surely take 3.5 hours of deposition of her. If you want that, we will agree to that. But I can't tell you a date right now because I don't know her circumstances. I'm generally worried about her. I'm worried she's going to have that baby. Ben, that's why we excused her. Elaine, how are you doing, Lucian? Remote technician, I sent the email about a minute ago. I should hear back shortly. Elaine, thank you. I have my exhibits right here. I have my outline right here. Ben, it's all besides the point at any rate. So, Elaine, why is it beside the point? Ben, because we're entitled to finish our examination of your witness. Elaine, no, you have 3.5 hours and you took your little more than 3.5 hours and I let you. Ben, we get 7. Elaine, no, you don't get 7. You made explicit representations and agreement. Ben, all right, Ms. Bredehoff, this is going nowhere. Ben, why don't we have to, Elaine, until we verify that we uploaded the exhibits at 9:41 this morning, I do not want the record falsely state that we did not upload. The technician, I might as well call at this point, so I'll just do that. The technician, I see a download link here and it looks like I'm seeing 4 exhibits. Elaine, correct. Technician, they were uploaded at 9:38 a.m. Elaine, I was off by 3 minutes. Okay, thank you very much, Lucian. I appreciate it. So now all right, we can go off the record. Ben, 4 exhibits? Elaine, correct. Technician, yep. Ben, 4 exhibits doesn't usually take 3.5 hours, but Elaine, I will represent I fully intend to take 3.5 hours, and you don't know what those exhibits are, and you don't know how lengthy they are. Ben, why don't you send them to us? Elaine, because I don't have to send them to you, and I'm not going to reveal my work product to you. Ben. Okay, all right. Well, we'll see you in the emergency motion. Elaine, you better not. You've been going to California on this one. This is Judge Bowick, who is the one who's ruling on these. So you have to talk to Michael about that. Ben, I think Judge Bowick, I think that's how you pronounce it. I'm sure I fucked it up. Elaine, you're right. You're right. My apologies. I pronounced it incorrectly, all right? Yep, just like Amica Cream, just like Battle, just like all the other things you fucking pronounce wrong. Even your client's own name, Laura Amber Heard. Miss Chu, it's also Presidio. Elaine, have a great day, everyone. You too. Okay, so Ben, okay, everyone have a great day. Ben's like, okay, you too. Elaine, are we off the record? Court reporter, yes, ma'am. Can I please get your orders? Does anyone need a rough? I guess the question is, Camille, we got a rush. Ben, yeah, we need a rush. Yeah, I definitely need a rush for probably the whole thing. Court reporter said, okay. And Miss Bredehoff, did you want the office to be in touch or did you want to let me know at this time? Elaine, we'll just take a copy whenever theirs is ready. The court reporter, okay, thank you. And Elaine, I did want to let you know that I was speaking with Camille and Ben, that as an officer of the court, if somebody, counsel wants to stay on record, it's my job to keep your guys' record open. It's your record, I'm just facilitating it. So, from the moment you hung up, the entire exchange is on record. We did go off the record, and so I apologize on behalf of Kim for that. But I just want to be clear that I'm the neutral party here, and it is my job to ensure that both parties have access to the record. Elaine, yeah, and I appreciate that. I thought that we were off the record, and that's why I left. I would not have left if I thought that we were still on the record. Oh, my God. And then they're gone. So what's this now? Oh, it's just his transcripts notes. All right, so that's it. That is it. Holy hell. Whitney lied her pants off. There's no way any of that happened the way she claims. And I love the fight at the end. I love it. I love how they just exposed Elaine for really just not being prepared. She just was not prepared. I understand Whitney was 9.5 months pregnant. I get it. But yeah, it was convenient timing for Elaine. I'll say that. All right, guys, that's it. That's all. I'll be back with more. Have a wonderful day. I appreciate every single one of you. Take care.